My name is Caleb, and last week I made a huge mistake. The year that I turned 21, my high school closed and nobody ever talked about it. I assumed it was closed because it was old. It had been up since 1802, and although it received some renovations over the years, it never got updated the way that we all thought it should have. I graduated at 18 and spent 3 years at home. My time spent at home was normally spent taking care of my parents. Both of them had health issues. When I wasn't home with them, I was spending my time working at Jack's auto shop down the street. My mom and dad died that third year and I left. I couldn't stand to live in the house, and although I didn't have the heart to sell the house, so I just decided to leave and not look back. My plan always was to come back once I had had a clear head. I was away from home for 4 years. A couple of months ago, I decided that I should return to my childhood home. Rent was rising in my area, and I was starting to grow tired of the hustle of living in the big city. What pushed me to leave was the headaches that I had been having. For a while, they were under control, but as time went on, they only got far worse. Seeing the "Welcome to Greenridge" sign, it felt like a wave of relief was washing over me. Something about being in a familiar place made me feel relaxed. Despite having not been here in years, everything was coming back to me in waves. I knew where the nearest grocery store was, all of the important stores, and even the theater. I was shocked that the theater was still up and operational. As I drove down the street, I decided to go check out my old stomping grounds. I drove past the middle school and could tell that it had been freshly renovated. The once brick building was replaced by a white building with large windows. I wasn't surprised to see that the football field was renovated as well. The biggest surprise was seeing the new hockey rink on the grounds. Hockey was always popular here, and I was happy that the kids would have access to the sport in a comfortable environment. My next stop was the high school. Since it was Monday, I figured they would already be done with classes because I was arriving around 4 p.m. When I finally reached the building, I was shocked to see the windows shuttered and the grass overgrown. It looked like no one had been here in years. I heard rumors a while back about the school closing for renovations the same year that I had turned 21, but there was no other building here. I thought they might have put it somewhere else, but I wondered why they would keep the building up if nobody was using it. As I moved my car forward to turn around, I noticed a man standing in the grass tending to the weeds. It took me a minute, but I finally got my car over enough to speak with him. "Excuse me," I called the man. "Yeah?" He called back without looking up. His clothes were tattered and worn down, covered in dirt and grime. I could recognize that he was wearing the custodian's uniform from the high school. It even had the gecko on the back. "What happened here? I used to go here years ago. Did they build a new building or what?" I asked him as I leaned out of the driver's side window. "Come back tomorrow and I'll tell you the story," the man said oddly before walking away. I laughed a little, and I told him that I would be back and decided to take a shortcut back home. There were no other cars behind me and none near my house. Cutting through the high school was the fastest way to reach my street. As I drove down the street, I looked at each one of my neighbors' houses. Everything looked old and each one had a for sale sign in the yard. Something must have happened. I remembered the street being lively and active. I pulled my car into my house, took the keys, and opened the door. Everything was just as I had left it. Waves of sadness washed over my body. I remembered walking into the living room to find my dad watching TV and reading the paper. My mom would be baking something and would even meet in the living room to show me what she bought while I was out. Running my hand through my hair, I walked right over to the couch and sat down. I sneezed because of the dust and let my current situation set in. After thinking about my life for a while, I got up to start cleaning the house up. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be, so I focused on the living room to start. The rest would have to come later. I ordered a pizza for dinner and I set up my laptop to watch some TV. The last thing on my mind was school, especially since I was finally able to get comfortable in my parents' house. As I sunk into the couch and looked out the window, it dawned on me how quiet the street was. No cars came down the road. The only sound was coming from my laptop. I sighed and I turned off my show. Before going to bed, I decided to do some research on the high school. I couldn't find anything though. There was nothing about it anywhere online. I thought that I was losing my mind. I looked for why the school had closed. I searched for the name of my street, and for both of those things, I couldn't get any answers. I had started to get annoyed, so I closed the laptop and I went to bed on the couch. When I woke up on Tuesday, I had a splitting headache. It felt like the weight of the world was resting on my face. The pressure was too much to ignore. I got up and I hobbled to the bathroom to see if there was any medicine left over, though it would probably be expired by now. As I got to the bathroom, the pressure began to lift from my head. It's hard for me to explain it, but it felt like I had to leave the house, almost like I was compelled to go. I took a quick shower, brushed my teeth, got dressed, and left the house right after. I figured I would stop for a breakfast or something. I just had to get out of the house. When I got outside, I triple-checked everything and made sure the door was locked before getting in my car. My hands were trembling. I took a sharp left to go to the closest store. I wanted to grab a coffee and something to eat. As soon as I had turned down the street, the pain in the back of my head came. This time, though, it felt much worse. I had to slam on the brakes, and luckily nobody was behind me. I turned my head back and backed the car up just enough to turn around and start heading back to my house. The closer to the house that I got, the more the pain increased. At this point, I could hardly see the road. I kept driving until I hit the turn that led to the high school. I could get to the clinic faster by cutting through. The pain in my head began to lift again as I approached the high school. Once I pulled my car over to the curb, the pain was gone completely. "You came back," a familiar voice called to me. The man was here already, tending to the same spot in the grass that he was looking after when I came yesterday. "Yeah," I said under my breath before opening my car door and stepping out to talk to the man. The weather by the school was nice and warm, much warmer than outside of my house. It felt like it was summer. I had to hear about what happened here. I laughed as I leaned on my car. "So, what can you tell me?" "I tried to look it up on the internet, but I didn't find anything," I told the man. I figured that I had some time to kill before trying to figure out what to do about my head. My first thought was maybe a tumor, but that wouldn't clearly explain why the pain came and went depending on where I was at. The man stood up fully and put his weight on his rake. 4 kids were killed here a couple of years ago. 4 more before that, and 4 more before that. He waved his hand as if he was telling me a fairy tale or something, like he was telling me something that didn't sound extremely serious. Each time there was a murder, they got more and more gruesome, he said solemnly. 5 kids were supposed to die each time, but 1 always got away, he explained before turning to face the school. The murders left our whole city divided. Blame was thrown all over. Some thought the killer was a teacher. Others thought that it was a parent, he said before turning back to face me. "I'm surprised you don't remember this," he told me. I didn't. I had never heard anything about the murders. "So, who actually did it?" I asked as I shoved my hands into my pockets. "No one knows," the man said as he moved to continue tending to the grass in the same spot. He moved over and over again, but the grass never changed. Wait, 12 teenagers were murdered and they never caught the person who did it. I was baffled. 13, the man corrected me. The last time there was a murder, it was supposed to be twins. 2 girls, he said as he adjusted his hat. One of the girls survived though, youngest of the bunch, he shrugged. Survivors would be turning 16 this year. He pointed out to me before starting to walk away. I had so many questions, and the most pressing one was, who exactly was this guy and why had he been tending to the same spot of grass for 2 days now? That was a lot of murder and nobody had told me. No one called. I never heard about anything like that in the news, and for the life of me, I couldn't find anything about the school or the town on the internet. I got back in my car and went to leave. My curiosity was now satiated. As I got to the end of the parking lot, that pain came back, and it came back with a vengeance. Felt like somebody was drilling a screwdriver into my forehead. I slammed into the brakes and backed up. I went back to the property of the school and put my teeth together. Something wanted me to be here. As I moved my hand to clean the blood trickling out of my nose and down my lips, I considered my options. I thought that I was going insane. I considered driving to the clinic, but if my vision went out again, I would accidentally kill someone. For a moment, I considered calling 911, but in the back of my mind, I knew that was a bad idea. Something wanted me to be here. My hands tightened around my steering wheel and I closed my eyes. I mean, a nap wouldn't hurt after all. Who was going to bother me? I woke up to a knocking at my window. It was the groundskeeper. I had to rub my eyes and make sure that it was him. Why was he at my car window? I rolled the window down. Hey, he tossed a flashlight onto my lap. You're going to need that, he told me as he walked away. I don't think I've ever been more confused in my life. These last few days have been something else. I grabbed the flashlight and jumped out of my car like I was moving on autopilot. Something wanted me to go to the school. Deep down, I think I wanted to go in too. I felt like I was both in and out of my body, like I was extremely tired but also extremely awake. It was a weird feeling to feel like I was being torn in half. I walked up to the front doors and opened them. I was honestly surprised that they weren't locked up. The main hallway was exactly how I had remembered it. Our mascot, the green ridge gecko, was stamped right in the middle of the floor. The downstairs area was dedicated to electives in the lunchroom. The auditorium was to my left behind the big brown doors. The gym was further in and the lunchroom was to the right. And despite the building looking worn down on the outside, the inside of the building was in great condition. Hello? Hello? I called. Hearing my voice echoing was strange. This place used to be so full of noise, I wasn't expecting an answer. My blood ran cold when a scream came from the auditorium. It cut through the silence like a warm knife through butter. I turned as quickly as I could and ran for the doors. I stopped at the seats furthest in the back. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A hooded figure wearing a sleek red mask was holding a girl by her neck. Her toes couldn't touch the ground. Both figures were blue, almost completely see-through. The figure plunged a knife into the girl's abdomen 3 times. Each time the knife was ripped out, the victim gagged, and eventually the killer slammed her body down and continued at it, the final blow landing right between her eyes. What the? I spit out before turning to the door to run away. I was going to go get the cops. Maybe they could catch this guy. I assumed it was the same killer that the groundskeeper was talking about. As I left the auditorium, a blue figure came walking past me. It was the same girl who was just on the stage. I could recognize her white jacket. I reached my hand out to grab her arm and was shocked to find that I could. She looked completely see-through, almost like a ghost. You can't go in there, I told her seriously. You're going to die, I warned. I watched her face twist in confusion. As I turned to look back into the auditorium, I could see the masked figure waiting for her on the stage. We made eye contact. I tightened my grip on the girl's arm and pulled her out of the doorway. A blue spark appeared at the edge of the door, and the rim of the doorway lit up with a baby blue color. "What is that?" the girl asked me. She looked beyond confused, and I was right there with her. I tugged at her again. "Follow me." I watched her body materialize. I watched as the color came back to her skin. I could see the color return to her eyes. I watched her face come back to life. I almost threw up. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. "You're alive," I mumbled. I could see the tears gathering in her eyes. "I was stabbed," she told me. "Well, not anymore," I said with confidence. "Now we're leaving." I pointed to the front door and we started to run for it when I heard screaming catch the air behind us. In a flash, I turned around and I backed up with the girl. An axe hit the door from on top of the stairs. A man wearing a mascot head was standing on the stairs holding another axe. "Are you kidding me?" I screamed before turning to the door to open it. As my hand hit the door, an axe hit my wrist. I screamed out and watched my hand hit the floor. My world was becoming a blur. I slowly reached down to pick up my hand. Blood was pooling on the floor. "We have to run," the girl screamed at me, but I could barely focus. I felt a sharp pain in my shoulder. The world was ringing. The next thing I knew, my legs were moving. I turned my head slightly and there was a smaller axe sticking out of my shoulder. I thought that I was going to lose my arm. The girl was dragging me. Once we had hit the emergency exit, I thought that she was going to disappear. I thought that everything would disappear, but it didn't. Instead, we went running across the parking lot in the back and looped around to my truck. "The hospital," I mumbled. "I'll drive," she said before helping me into the passenger seat. The rest of what happened is all a blur. I know that we got to the hospital and I know that I was there for a while and I know that we eventually went back to my house. I was in and out of it throughout most of the process. Heck, I don't even really remember the hospital visit. My hand and arm are completely wrapped up. Both cuts were clean. The lapses in my memory are scaring the heck out of me. And this girl is still with me. She says that her name is Kira. We have a lot of talking to do. Kira and I had to lay low for a while after what had happened at the high school. My left hand was completely unusable. Luckily, they were able to reattach it to my wrist. My shoulder is still recovering, but it'll be a while until I can use my left arm. We decided to take a few days to gather our thoughts and go over what we know. Kira filled me in on what she could remember, and I shared what I could remember. Together, we were able to put some major pieces to this puzzle in place. Kira told me that she didn't fully remember being attacked in the auditorium. Most of that day was a complete blur for her. She told me that she was on the stage to help set up for a school play. Nobody else was there yet, and she had just left her science class. I asked her if she remembered the person in the mask, the one who had lifted her and killed her. My first thought was maybe this was a bully or somebody that she had bullied. She did remember the killer but told me that he felt too strong to be another student. He lifted her up with ease and held her like she was made of paper. Kira told me that she had clawed his wrist, but by the time that he had his hand around her neck, she felt like she couldn't move. She detailed how it felt to be strangled and the pain that shot through her body when he slammed her onto the stage. She had a scar on her nose where I saw the knife land. I asked her about it and she said she didn't remember how she got it. We talked on the couch for hours. I asked her if she had noticed anything weird at school that day and she told me that she didn't. What stood out to me was that she didn't remember the murders happening. At this point in our conversation, I made a note to get the names of all the victims and, if I could, these survivors too. Maybe I could pinpoint the exact date when she was murdered. "Why did you grab me?" Kira eventually asked me. She had been crying for hours, and I was surprised that she still wanted to talk. I told her that I had watched her die and I felt compelled to do something to try and help her. I confessed that I wasn't sure I would be able to grab her arm, but once I realized I could, I knew that I had to do everything possible to keep her from going back to the stage. Someone commented last time about how I took Kira from death, and I couldn't agree more. Somehow I was able to reach into wherever she was and pull her out of there. Finally, I asked her about the axe-wielding man who tried to kill both of us. She told me that was the first time she had ever seen that person, and we both agreed that we didn't want to meet him again. That night, I took out an old notebook and decided to write some things down. I knew for sure that I would be going back to Greenridge High School. It was only a matter of time before the headaches returned. For the moment, I am calling the two murderers Redface and Mascot Killer. I know the names suck, but whatever. I noted that Mascot Killer was found at the top of the stairs. Kira told me that he never came downstairs to chase us. Redface never left the auditorium, so we assume that is where he'll always be found. I know it's a big stretch to say they will never leave where we've seen them, but if Redface had wanted Kira so badly, I felt like he would have come after us anyway. After taking my notes, I went to sleep. We spent the next few days staying inside and away from the windows. I had to assume that people thought that Kira was dead, so seeing her walking around would raise a lot of red flags. "You're going back." Kira snapped at me as she watched me pack up a small backpack. "Yes, I have to go back," I told her seriously as I put my flashlight under my good arm. I was wondering if I would see the groundskeeper again. In the back of my mind, I felt like he knew what was going to happen when I walked into the school. "You only have one good arm," Kira pointed out as she followed me around the house. "I know," I sighed before placing some money on the counter. "That's for food, but only order food as a last resort. We still have some leftovers." I opened the fridge to double check and make sure that there was enough food for her to heat up if she got hungry. "Let me help you," Kira pleaded with me. "No, if we're seen by anyone, they will have a lot of questions. Plus, I'm not putting you in the crosshairs of a bunch of murderers," I said seriously. I took my car keys from the table and stopped at the front door. "If I don't come back, dye your hair or something and get out of here," I told Kira before opening the front door and heading out to my car. I waited on the steps to make sure that she locked the door. The last time that I made this drive, everything was foggy. I was in a lot of pain and it felt like everything around me was only going to get worse. This time, despite feeling waves of uncertainty pouring over my body, I felt clear. I felt like for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I was supposed to do, at least as far as going back to school was concerned. As I pulled up to Greenridge High School, I scanned the area for the groundskeeper. I was surprised he wasn't sitting in the same spot that he always was. I parked my car and I walked up to the building. I probably should have at least taken Kira with me to be the getaway driver in case I got injured again. "Back so soon?" the groundskeeper asked me. I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard his voice. I turned around and sure enough, there he was, holding his rake and wearing the same clothes that he was wearing the last time that I saw him. "Are you trying to give me a heart attack?" I gasped. I didn't hear him coming up behind me. He only laughed and walked back to the grass to continue working. I watched him for a second before moving my flashlight to try and open the door. I eventually got it, but I really should have taken Kira with me. Walking back into the school was like walking through a thick fog. It felt like I had to force myself through the doorway. I turned my head to see if the axe mark was still in the door, and sure enough it was. My blood was still on the floor too. I was attacked in here. This time, my head felt incredibly clear in the building though. It was a weird feeling to know exactly where I needed to be. I was not going to go to the second floor with one hand, so I decided to continue on the first floor. I had my choice of the lunchroom or the gym, and I went with the gym. As I walked towards it, I took a second to look around me. There was no sign of mascot killer or red face. The gym was down a hallway like the lunchroom. The locker rooms were divided by the office for the coach. As I walked down the hallway, I heard rustling coming from the girls' locker room. Eventually, that rustling turned into screaming. At first, I didn't want to open the door though. When the second scream interrupted the silence, I ripped the door open. The locker room was an absolute mess. Blood painted the walls, but it was very old. "Get away from me!" I heard a girl scream. I ran through the room before finding the girl, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The girl was wearing a gym uniform. Unlike Kira, her outline was green. She was still see-through though. The man standing behind her looked like a giant in comparison. He was wearing the school's hockey uniform and a hockey mask. I reached out to see if I could reach the girl before she was murdered. She ran backward though, placed her foot on the wall, and boosted herself up to the window. I watched her climb out. She wasn't killed. I didn't have too much time to think about it because the killer turned his attention to me. He was see-through for a second. I watched as his skin slowly appeared. In a matter of seconds, he was becoming whole. I turned as quickly as possible, nearly tripping on clothes, and ran back down the hallway as fast as I could. I was running away from the gym and this killer was following me. I heard his hockey stick hit the wall when he tried to swing it at my back. The moment that I was out of the hallway, the killer stopped following me. He was just standing there right at the end, watching me. He wasn't as big as I thought he was. He was probably about 6'4" or 6'5", but not ginormous. He did have massive shoulders though, and his clothing was caked in dry blood. As he stood there watching me, I couldn't help but wonder, who did he kill? It looked like he was guarding the hallway, so I decided to back up and head to the lunchroom instead. I clenched the flashlight tightly, fully expecting somebody to come running at me the moment that I opened the lunchroom doors. I had to push on these doors hard. Something was blocking them from the other side. I was eventually able to get one of the doors open with my good shoulder. I could hear the table scraping the floor as I pushed the door open. The room was an absolute disaster. Somebody was clearly trying to barricade the door shut. The tables were set up in a way to keep the doors pinned. From across from where I was standing, I could see the same setup on the other side of the room. As I walked further into the lunchroom, I called, "Is anybody in here? I'm not here to hurt you." I stopped walking for a second to wait for an answer. When I didn't get one, I continued to explore the room. I almost gave up before I noticed one of the tables that was still right side up had a book sitting on it. I walked over and put my flashlight in my mouth and brought the book closer to me. It was a school yearbook, but something was wrong with it. It was a white book with our mascot on it. Nothing about it looked special, and there was no year. I was going to look through it, but I heard the door creak open behind me. I forgot to put the tables back where I had found them. I quickly put the book in my backpack and took the flashlight in my good hand. The moment that I got light in the door, something slammed into my leg with enough force to bring me to my knees. I looked down. Large glass shards were sticking out of my skin. I looked up to see where the attack came from, and that's when I saw her. She was wearing a long white coat and large circular glasses that I hadn't seen anybody wearing in a long time. She had a tall glass in her hand. She must have thrown one at me. I quickly forced myself up and went for an exit before remembering that all of the doors except the one that I came in from, I had to run around her to get out. As I ran towards the woman, I tried to sidestep her. She slammed the glass into my back and I stumbled forward, I thought that she would be weaponless now, but as I turned around to see if she was chasing me, I watched a new glass cup start to take shape in her hand. I took 2 steps back and I ran for the door. I managed to use my foot to push it open fully before being hit in the back again. Luckily, she was only throwing glass at me. It was something that I knew I could walk off. I ran for the front door expecting Mascot Killer to be waiting at the top of the steps, but he wasn't there. I could hear the woman leaving the lunchroom. As I tucked the flashlight under my bad arm, I ripped the front door open and practically threw myself outside. "See you soon," the groundskeeper called to me as I ran to my truck. I jumped inside and pulled some glass out of my knee before driving home. After I got back from my last trip to the school, I went to bed. I decided to fill Kira in when she woke up in the morning. I set my flashlight on the coffee table and pulled the yearbook out of my backpack. I figured we could go over the book together in the morning. "That's insane," Kira snapped at me as she paced around the living room. "I know it sounds crazy, but she climbed out of the window and got away," I told Kira as I watched her dart around the living room. "If she got away, why was she still glowing?" Kira asked me. She had a good point and I didn't have an answer for her. "I honestly don't know," I said as I sat on the couch. "And who was in the lunchroom? Do you think someone else is looking around the school?" Kira asked me as she sat in the recliner for a second before getting up to pace again. "I have no idea," I mumbled. "Well, we need to get an idea," Kira snapped at me. I didn't have enough energy to yell at her. I knew why she was getting so worked up about all of this. Headaches might have been drawing me to the school, but she died there and we still didn't know who killed her and why. "Well, we can look at the yearbook," I suggested to her. "We have to go back to the school and see if somebody is there looking around," Kira said. I shook my head no. "We have clues now, okay? Let's check out this yearbook," I said again, this time using my good arm to flip the book open. When I saw what was inside, my heart sank. The first few pages were empty. I flipped through the book faster. Every single page was empty. In a fit of rage, I slammed the book shut and tossed it across the room. I got hit with glass for no reason and we were back to square one. We had nothing. Kira flinched back as she watched the book hit the floor. "Sorry," I said seriously. "I wasn't trying to scare her." "It's okay," Kira whispered as she sat on the chair. I could see it on her face. She was feeling hopeless. There was nothing that I could do to assure her that we would find anything. "Tomorrow we will go back and get answers. Come heck or high water, but we have to be prepared first," I told Kira as I got off the couch. Gear, food, water, and a weapon are a must. I trailed on as I walked to my bedroom. I grabbed an extra backpack and brought it out to Kira. "We're gonna get answers," I said seriously as I handed her the bag. Kira took it inside. "What do you want me to do?" "Fill up the water bottles in the kitchen. I'm gonna head to the store," I told her as I grabbed my car keys and left. The moment that I started driving away from the house, my headache started coming back. It wasn't as strong as all the other ones, and it was something that I could push through to make sure that I got what we needed. I couldn't go too far because the further that I went, the worse that the headache became. I had to settle for going to the corner store. I got us more water, some food, and each one of us a special drink. I got myself a soda and Kira an apple juice, because she had killed 3 bottles of juice already. I made sure to grab food that would last, and snacks because I knew that we could eat them quickly. The challenge was finding anything that we could use that might make a decent weapon. I didn't end up finding anything and we were going to have to use what I had in the house. Finally, I bought some gum and scratch-off tickets. I used the last of my cash to buy a small flashlight for Kira. It wasn't anything amazing, but at least she would have one if she needed it. I packed up the car and I started to head home. Once again, the closer that I got to my house, the more that the headache began to lift. I was starting to wonder what force was drawing me back to the school, and what it wanted with me in the first place. "You got some juice?" Kira asked as she went to grab the bottle. I laughed and held it away from her. "I did, but you have to put it in your bag," I said seriously as I handed her the bottle. "Are you expecting us to be inside for a long time?" Kira asked me while she was helping me pack the backpacks. "If we get stuck, we need to make sure that we have supplies." When I was in the lunchroom, I noticed that somebody had barricaded the doors. If I had to guess, they spent the night, or at least were using the room as a base of sorts. I explained to Kira as we took our bags to my car and climbed inside. "Before we go in, I have to check something out with the groundskeeper," I told her as we drove to Greenridge High School. "The school doesn't have one," Kira said, confused. "When I was in school we did, but this guy is different, I think. He tends the same plot of grass for hours," I said as we pulled into the school. I wanted to jump out and check the grass right away, but he was standing on it. He was working the same way that he was the last time that I saw him. At least I knew where he was this time. I parked the car and froze. There was another car sitting in the parking lot. "Someone else is here," I told Kira as I hopped out of the car. From where we were standing, I could tell that the car was empty. "Maybe we should check the car," Kira suggested as she grabbed her bags. "No." I shook my head and took my bag with my good arm. Kira handed me my flashlight and we walked toward the building. Checking the car could be a good idea, but I didn't want to give someone a reason to call the cops on us. "We have to go to the main office first," I told Kira. I wasn't going to leave any room for discussion. The main office could have many useful things. I was hoping for an employee log, keys, or anything of importance. As we walked through the first floor, I told Kira to stay away from the hallway that leads to the gym. We also kept an eye out for the woman who was throwing glass at me. I was sure that she must be able to walk around the halls freely, if she was in the lunchroom. "What if there's a killer in there?" Kira asked as we finally reached the main office. We were fortunate that everything we needed so far was on the first floor. To get to the main office, we had to continue down the front hallway, towards the elective rooms. "Well, we run," I whispered to Kira. I gave her my flashlight and we went to open the office door, and surprisingly, it actually opened for us. Kira screamed at the top of her lungs. A voice from the door snapped, "Be quiet!" The door opened fully and a woman looked out at us and moved the door to let us in. Kira quickly moved into the main office and I followed after her. The blonde woman locked the door before turning to us. She was pointing a kitchen knife at me. "Who are you and why are you here?" the woman asked me. "Caleb, my name is Caleb and this is Kira. Who are you?" I asked the woman as I kept my good hand up. "Cassandra," she said as she reached out to tap each of us. I was confused for a moment, but she must have been making sure that we were real. "I wasn't expecting anybody else to be here." Cassandra told me once she was done with her inspection. "Neither were we," I told her honestly. "Were you the one who left the blank yearbook in the lunchroom?" I asked her as I started moving around the office. I was looking for student records, keys, or anything that we could use to help us finally get answers. "Yes. I couldn't figure out what to do with it and I had to get going," Cassandra told me as she watched me look around. There was nothing of note in the first area of the office. I couldn't find any records. It was like the whole place had been cleaned out. "Why is this place empty?" I questioned Cassandra. I was hoping she would tell me that we had arrived as she was cleaning the place out. I was wondering the same thing. I haven't checked the principal's office yet, Cassandra told me as she motioned to the only other door in this room. "Why the heck did you bring a kid here?" Cassandra asked me. "Well, I found her here," I explained to Cassandra as I tested the door to the principal's office. "He saved my life," Kira corrected. "She was a spirit, I think," I told Cassandra as I opened the door. I was expecting her to be surprised. I thought she would laugh at me or think that I was joking. Green, blue, red, or orange? Cassandra asked me as she and Kira followed me into the office. She was bluish, I guess. Why? As I asked Cassandra, I went right over to the desk in the room and opened every drawer. Eventually, I found a set of keys. And because I was wondering if you figured out what the colors were for, Cassandra sighed. I looked up at both of them and smiled. I finally found something useful, I said as I put the key ring on the desk. That's a lot of keys, Kira said as she walked over to examine the key ring. One of those has to be a skeleton key, Cassandra told us as she went through the filing cabinets. I could hear her swearing and slamming things shut. What? Kira asked her. Every file is empty. Cassandra snapped as she slid her hands through her hair. I could tell that we were both thinking the same thing. Someone had to have been here before us. The only other person that I've seen here has been the groundskeeper. I haven't seen him enter the building, but maybe he came in here to clean the place out. Once we had finished looking around the room, Cassandra put the empty files on the desk. Lucky for us, they were still labeled. I went through each of the names on the empty files. Ava Miller, Liam Cooper, Mason Kent, Harper Scott, Grace Thompson, and Lucas Reed. There weren't enough files for all of the murdered teenagers and the ones who went away, but this was a good place to start. I took the folders into my backpack and looked up at Cassandra. Why are you here? I asked her seriously. For all I knew, she could be hiding her crimes. My brother died here and my sister Hannah got away. I was away from school when I got the phone call. By the time that I got here, my family's house was packed up and most of the furniture was already gone. Cassandra closed her eyes tightly. My sister left me a note in my old bedroom. It said that she had run away, but she didn't leave an address or any indication as to where she would be going. I've been looking for her for months, Cassandra said as she opened her eyes to look at me and Kira. I had a lot of questions that I wanted to ask, but before I could, we hear screaming coming from the hallway. We ran around the girls to get to the office door. What are you doing? Cassandra snapped as she followed me. I can help them, I snapped back. You only have one arm, Kira tried to remind me. I let my head hang out of the doorway for a second. The commotion was coming from closer to the art rooms. I slowly left the office and walked down the hallway. I was trying to keep my boots as quiet as possible. I turned the corner to the art rooms and I watched as a see-through man slammed a boy into the lockers face first. The boy was glowing orange. After a few more slams, the man lifted the boy and slammed him into the floor. I watched as the tile crashed under the weight. I heard a loud snapping sound. I'm assuming the boy passed when his neck hit the floor. I waited for a second to see if there was anything that I could do. The killer walked over to the trash can at the end of the hallway. It was also glowing. This was the first time that an object was glowing. The yellow glow from the trash can illuminated the killer just enough for me to see his coaching jacket. Most of the back of the jacket was ripped apart. It looked like a cat or something had clawed massive slash marks into it. I watched as he slowly pulled a girl from the trash can. She coughed and spit blood all over him. She looked different too. Her glow was red, and despite everything being see-through, she was the most clear to me. She screamed at him, hit him in the face, and she was fighting back, but it didn't matter. Using her leg, he slammed her from locker to locker like she was weighing nothing. I couldn't watch him kill her. It was hard enough to listen to it. Once he was done, I turned my head to look back down the hallway. The images were fading away. Last time this happened, I was able to intercept Kira before she was murdered in the auditorium. I waited until the killer faded completely before rushing down the hallway. As I ran down the hallway to see if I could interfere with the trash can, Kira spoke from behind me. What are you doing? I'm gonna save 2 more people, I hissed at Kira. You and Cassandra pick a spot to hide or get ready to help me, I instructed. I filled them in on what I knew, and both of the girls hid around a corner. All three of us waited. The moment that I heard the girl's voice, I looked up. She wasn't coming from upstairs. Instead, she was coming out of the girls' bathroom behind me. Her face was already cut up, and she was clearly upset about something. I quickly turned around and ran over to her. I put my arm out to grab her. Unlike Kira, I couldn't grab her right away. There was a force pushing me back, but I didn't care. No one deserved to die the way that she did. I just kept pushing. "Listen!" I screamed at the girl. She couldn't hear me. I was assuming she was attacked before the boy. She had already been put into the trash can before the boy was attacked, and we were running out of time. "You're going to die!" Cassandra screamed from the end of the hallway. The girl looked up confused. She heard Cassandra, but she couldn't hear me. I had no time to think about why. I reached forward and took her by the arm, ripping her out of wherever she was proved to be a challenge. I was fighting with something, and there was another force that wanted her. Once I got her out and watched the color return to her skin, her school jacket had blood all over the front of it. I moved to get her down the hallway into Cassandra. "Once I get the boy, we're going to have to run for it," I said. Cassandra took the girl and watched me go back down the hallway. The boy was coming out of one of the art rooms, but something was wrong. The killer was already here. I could see him at the end of the hallway. "Run!" Kira snapped as we watched the killer start running down the hallway. I ran over to the boy and grabbed him by his collar. I tried to spin us around to get out. I could feel his hands wrap around my wrist as we fell and squirmed on the floor. I quickly brought him to his feet. Like the girl, he was clearly confused about what had just happened to him. "Run!" Kira screeched. I turned my head and pushed the boy backward, his back hitting the locker. I could see Kira running down the hallway. I watched as she took him by the hand and we started running. "Crap!" Cassandra snapped as we turned the corner. I screamed loudly and almost fell to my knees. Something hit my back. I tried to reach back and pull it out while we were running. Once I finally got it, I was looking at glass. "The scientist is here!" I screamed at the group. Something felt different about this chase. Something felt more visceral. "Watch out!" Cassandra screamed as a baseball smacked Kira. It hit her in the side with enough force to knock her over. The boy stopped running to help her up. Kira spit blood out all over the floor. I stopped running to see where the attack came from. There was a guy holding a baseball bat standing at the back door. His eyes were bright red and his baseball bat was glowing yellow. "You have got to be kidding me!" I screamed as we all ran for the front door. This time, I was going to be ready for the mascot killer. "Watch the stairs!" I screamed at Cassandra. She moved just in time to have a hatchet miss her arm. I could hear the man laughing from the stairs. Cassandra ripped the doors open and we all ran out. I could hear my heart beating in my head. The adrenaline was almost too much for me to handle. Feeling the fresh air in my face as a nice reminder that we got out of the school, but I was extremely confused to see that the sun was up. "Get to my car," I screamed at Kira. "What about you?" Kira called back to me as they continued running across the parking lot. I made a note to park closer to the building next time. "There's something that I have to do," I screamed back as I ran over to where the groundskeeper was tending the dirt. I ran over to the dirt and dug my good hand into it. I was trying to move as fast as possible. I could hear Kira screaming behind me, but I couldn't make out what she was saying. As I dug through the dirt, I could hear something running next to me. I looked up and saw the groundskeeper coming. His face was twisted and distorted. His eyes were sunken in and he was running like an animal. I was digging as fast as I could and eventually I found something. I ripped it out of the dirt and got up and I was holding a hot pink diary. As I turned to run away, something slammed into my leg. This time I could feel blood trickling down my pants and into my boot. I looked down to see a gardening tool sticking out of my skin. I clenched the book and screamed. I was sure that he was going to kill me. I watched his jaw crack and pop as he closed in. I closed my eyes and heard my car screech. I looked up to see Kira behind the wheel. The boy was holding my flashlight like a weapon, shining it at the man. The light hit him and made him screech. I watched as he ran away, going behind the school. I felt a hand grab my arm and I was sure that it was another killer, but no, it was Cassandra. She pulled me to my feet and got me in her car. "Kira, drive home," I screamed. Cassandra and I watched as Kira started to leave the school grounds. We followed as closely as possible. As Cassandra drove, I looked at the small book in my hand. We finally had answers. We went through the diary page by page, and what we found was extremely disturbing. I can't take you through every page here, so I'm going to give you some of the highlights. The diary belonged to Taylor Brown, and she was a student at the high school at some point. All of the dates on top of each page were scribbled out by her pen though, and for a good reason. Taylor wrote about all the weird and unexplained things that she was seeing in the high school. On multiple occasions, teachers would quit or disappear only to be back in the school a couple of days later. Notably, her science teacher quit 4 times, and each time she came back. Taylor wrote about how the woman was clearly unstable, going as far as to toss rulers at her students, but nobody found this odd. Another page talked about how she followed the custodian one afternoon because he had been watching a student all day. The student's name was scribbled out. She followed him to the basement where she said the walls were pulsing and moving. She said it looked like the basement was breathing. She did not stay down there to look around. We also learned something troubling. Apparently, Taylor knew Kira. There are pages upon pages talking about their friendship. They were in drama class together. Taylor said that she didn't get a major role like Kira. Notably, Taylor was in school the day that Kira was murdered. She wrote about how the police came to remove her body, but the rest of the school day went on like nothing had happened. Kira didn't have a funeral. We filled Kira in on everything we read, but she didn't remember Taylor. She couldn't remember what play she was in either. Cassandra and I decided not to push her too hard, and instead focused on what we did know. Before we left for our last trip, we organized all the information that we already knew. We saved Kira Jones. We learned her last name from Taylor's diary. Kira did remember her last name once we had said it to her. We also had saved Hunter James and Coraline Clark. Kira was glowing blue, Coraline was glowing red, and Hunter was glowing orange. All of the killers were the same color except for the man with the baseball bat. I went through the list of killers with Cassandra. The red mask killer is the man who murdered Kira in the auditorium. We haven't seen him since the first day we went back, and we are still under the assumption that he is stuck in the auditorium. We are not sure it's even a man though. The killer mascot is always upstairs in an area that we haven't explored and will not be exploring anytime soon. He wears the school mascot head and tosses hatchets. The hockey mask killer was in the gym hallway, an area that I would have liked to explore more. In the girls' locker room, I saw a girl escape out of the window and she was glowing green. We suspect that the girl who was glowing green made it out alive, but we have nothing else to go on regarding her. The woman who throws glass beakers is probably the same woman who Taylor was writing about. And finally, the killer who had murdered Coraline and Hunter. He was wearing a coach jacket. Cassandra and I believe that all of the killers were teachers or faculty. We could only confirm this if we had anyone's names. Cassandra and I took the list of names in our backpacks and we left the trio of teenagers at my house and took her car. I figured I would leave mine for Kira in case they needed a way to leave the house. We stressed the importance of all of them staying inside. So what is our goal exactly if this is the last time that we're going in? Cassandra asked me as we got in her car. We have to investigate the basement, I responded as I buckled up. The drive to the school felt somber. The only reason that I wanted to check the basement was because I was sure that we would finally find some answers. A room that breathes has to mean something in the grand scheme of things. As we pulled up to the school, I opened the door and I looked out for the groundskeeper. He wasn't outside, but it looked like he had put the dirt in the hole that I made. "We should park right out front," I suggested to Cassandra. "I think the door to the basement is in the first staircase," Cassandra said as she pulled up and we got out of the car. I was armed with my flashlight while Cassandra had a flashlight and a crowbar. Walking into the high school for the last time felt different. I waited by the door for a second to make sure that we weren't going to be jumped. "Do you think the school gets angry when we remove a spirit?" Cassandra asked me as we moved through the hallways. Well, it would make sense. We were fine last time until we decided to help Coraline and Hunter. I agreed with Cassandra as we slowly checked each of the doorways. Neither of us could remember this part of the building. I wonder if Kira was murdered because Taylor was getting curious. I mumbled as we opened the door to a classroom. It is weird that school went on that day like nothing happened, Cassandra said as she tried to step into a classroom. I watched her face hit a barrier. Cassandra took 2 steps back and grabbed her nose with her free hand. "What the?" I asked. I walked over to the classroom and put my foot out. My boot hit an invisible wall. We couldn't enter this classroom or any of the other classrooms that we tried. We both thought that it was weird but decided to keep looking for the staircase. "I don't think the groundskeeper's evil," I sighed to Cassandra. "He tried to kill you," she pointed out. When we found the staircase, I entered first. I knew that we had to go down, but I tried to use the stairs to go up and find another invisible barrier. I made a note of it and turned around to go downstairs. "He was helpful before I messed with his dirt," I told Cassandra. She opened her mouth to respond to me but quickly shut it when we heard whistling coming from the next floor down. I readied my flashlight, fully prepared to hit a killer over the head with it. I had its name all figured out. I was going to call it the Whistler. When we turned the corner, we were both surprised to see an old man standing over a mop bucket. He was cleaning the floor. "Hello?" Cassandra called out to him. I could see her gripping the crowbar harder. The man put the mop back into the bucket and smiled at Cassandra. "A spirit medium and a spirit walker come to see the heart of the school," he asked us as he added more soap to the bucket. "What?" Cassandra asked. "The heart. Like when we open this door, a heart will be inside," I asked. He only laughed at us. "Inside you'll find the place where it all started. You'll know what to do when you get there. But be warned, everything about your lives will change when you go inside," he said as he reached into his pocket. He reached out and handed me 2 batteries. "Your flashlight will need those," he warned me as he went up the stairs. We stood there in silence for a moment. My flashlight battery eventually went out. I was pretty surprised and grateful to the man for giving me a new set. "Are you sure we should go in there?" Cassandra asked me as we looked at the door. "Our lives have already changed a lot. How could it possibly get weirder?" I said as I watched Cassandra reach for the doorknob. "I hope you didn't jinx us," Cassandra grumbled as she slowly opened the door. As we walked into the basement, we were hit with the smell of old air and gasoline. I crinkled my nose and continued pushing forward. We used our flashlights to scan as much of the room as possible. Eventually, Cassandra's flashlight settled on the west wall and we slowly walked over. From where we were standing, we could make out a lot of pictures. As we got closer, we both had to take a second and process what we were seeing. There were pictures of each of the students on the wall, each one connected to a thin red wire. Each student's picture was connected to a different killer. Rarely did students seem to share a killer. Kira, Hunter, and Coraline were all there. Each one is connected to the killer that had murdered them. I watched Cassandra reach up and take a picture of a blonde girl off the wall. "Your sister?" I asked her. "Hannah," Cassandra said through gritted teeth. There is a picture next to Hannah's. That kid didn't make it. Cassandra pulled his picture down too. I assumed that she knew him. Everything was here, even Taylor had a picture. She wrote for the school newspaper. The teenagers who were murdered had red wire and the ones who got away had green wire. Taylor didn't have any wire attached to her picture. Instead, her picture was plastered in the middle of the board next to a man that we didn't recognize. Some guy named Noah. There was too much here for us to get a good look at it. Plus, all of the papers and notebooks under the board. Somebody spent a lot of time putting this together. The longer that I looked at everything, the more that I realized I didn't know this place at all. This was not the school I remembered. Pack up everything. I told Cassandra as I put my light down to start filling my backpack with as much as I could carry. This is unbelievable, Cassandra said as she shoved as much as possible into her bag. We had to take the board apart to make everything fit. Once we finished, I took my light and pointed it further down the hallway. Something was coming. I could hear boots hitting the floor. Before I could shout at Cassandra to brace herself, something hit my body. It wasn't a bad feeling by any means. A wave of cold had washed over me. My heart was beating frantically, yet I felt still. My head felt heavy for a moment before it all came rushing back to me. My name is Caleb and I never went to this school. I went to a private school and the memories that I had of this place were mostly fabricated. I could see my life flashing before my eyes. I saw my mom sending me to the school bus. I saw my father taking me to my football games. I had no real memories of Greenridge High School. Something drew me here. Something wanted me here. Caleb! Cassandra snapped me as she pulled me to my feet. Holy crap, I said as I grabbed Cassandra by her forearm. Did you see that? I asked her. Yes. Cassandra gasped as another wave of air washed over us. The air wasn't strong enough to knock us down this time, so we both decided to continue pushing forward. I was going to get answers. As we went deeper into the basement, the waves of air got stronger until eventually we found what was causing it. In the middle of the floor, a young man was sitting hunched over a book. He was glowing red, a bright red, almost like Coraline was. I could see the blood running down his face. The drops of red were hitting the glowing yellow book. Hello? Cassandra called to the boy. You need to leave, the boy warned. He looked up at us and clenched the book harder. She's coming, he screamed. I didn't have a chance to ask who was coming before I heard a loud scream. I moved my flashlight up as quickly as possible, but something threw me back. My feet left the floor and my back hit the wall. I coughed loudly and I fell to my knees. When I looked up, I watched as Cassandra was tossed to the side twice. Her body hit the wall once and was quickly lifted again, and she was slammed again, and this time whatever was attacking let her body hit the floor. Nothing was there, nothing was grabbing Cassandra. We were being attacked by air. I quickly scrambled to my feet to try and get to her, and that's when I saw the woman. She was wearing a long black dress. Her hair was in a tight bun and her glasses were completely cracked. She screamed at me again and put both of her hands out. I couldn't move. My blood felt like it was on fire and my eyes felt like they were going to burst. You have to block her magic, the boy screamed. I could see him doing motions with his arms, but I couldn't move. Let him go, Cassandra screamed as she smacked the woman with a crowbar. Black blood flew all over the floor. I felt the woman's hold on me release and I could breathe again. Cassandra swung down to hit the woman again, and I watched as she was flung into the air. Cassandra hit a pipe and landed face first on the ground. I could barely process what was going on. Behind the woman, I could see the boy doing arm motions, so I copied one. I crossed my arms when she reached out to me. I could feel her energy trying to hit me, but nothing was happening. I was sliding back though. The pain coursing through my bad arm was too intense, but I knew putting it down was going to be a death sentence. I couldn't keep this up for much longer. "Cassandra, you have to get up," I screamed at her. I could hear my arm breaking. I screamed in pain as my back finally hit a wall. I should have left instructions to the trio in case we died. "Die," Cassandra screeched as she slammed the crowbar into the back of the woman's head. Her body crumpled forward and black blood hit the floor. "We have to go," Cassandra coughed out. Her nose was broken and she had blood all over her lips. "The boy," I hissed. "Kid?" Cassandra called into the darkness. "As long as she lives, I can't leave," the boy said to us from somewhere. He was no longer sitting in the middle of the floor. "We killed her," I insisted. Cassandra slammed a crowbar through the back of her head. "Nobody could live from that." "Oh, she'll get back up. Just take the book and go," the boy said. Cassandra reached down and lifted the yellow book from the floor. I felt sick to my stomach and we couldn't just leave him here. But I also knew we were not going to defeat that woman a second time. Once we left the basement and started heading upstairs, we could tell that something had changed within the school. All the lights were on and the power was back. It felt nice to turn off my flashlight. I wondered what we did. We didn't save the boy and apparently we didn't kill that woman. As we walked back into the main hallway, we were both shocked to see the janitor cleaning the floor. "Be safe out there," he said to us as we walked by him. "Thank you," I told him sincerely. "Do you think we won?" Cassandra asked me as she leaned back in her seat. "No, it feels like we took the band-aid off of a much larger problem. But we saved 3 people and finally have what we need to get answers," I told Cassandra. She laughed and I laughed with her because we both knew that we could be sorting through all of those papers for weeks. It was stupid and immature. I'll be the first to admit that. But it's not like I did anything bad to anyone. If you want to try to understand things from my perspective, there was really no way that I could not do it. First, because his name was Mr. Hillrow. Second, because he acted like an idiot. Always calling on you the one day you didn't do the reading, and then dragging out the embarrassment in front of the whole class. And third, he sort of looked like a you-know-what, with his ring of puffy hair surrounding the bald top of his head. It was like I had to do it. I got Billy's older brother, a previous student of Mr. Hillrow, to give me the you-know-what. Then, before class started, I stood it up on Mr. Hillrow's desk. I taped a pair of tiny glasses to the head, wrapped a tiny necktie around it, and propped up a little name tag that read, Mr. Hillrow, but with a D instead of the R. At first, everyone laughed, and then Mr. Hillrow got upset and started yelling in a scary way, demanding to know who had done it. The class got real quiet. Nobody ratted me out. I gave myself away. I took another look at Mr. Hillrow and I started cracking up again. So that's how I ended up in detention. But it was only supposed to be for 3 afternoons, not 3 years. The school is different at night. It didn't take long at all for me to find that out. The first afternoon of my detention went about like you would expect. I had to sit there and read that book about the giant whale. It took everything I had not to make another joke, because Mr. Hillrow was sitting at his desk, just angrily glaring at me the whole time. At 4 on the nose, Mr. Hillrow stood up. I grabbed my backpack, ready to get the heck out of there. "Your actions are unspeakably vulgar," said Mr. Hillrow. I thought about the name tag again, and almost lost it from the effort of not cracking up. Mr. Hillrow went on. "You will stay here through the night and reflect upon the proper manner in which to conduct yourself while enrolled in this educational institution." And then he flicked off the light switch and left the room. That threw me for a loop, but I shrugged it off, stood up and went to get out of there. The door was locked. What the heck? Okay, Mr. Hillrow, I shouted through the door. I looked through the little window at the top and saw the back of his half-bald mushroom head as he walked down the hall. You got me, I gotta hand it to you. That's a good one. I've definitely learned my lesson. Mr. Hillrow disappeared around the corner. I stood staring out of that little window for about 15 minutes, before it started to dawn on me that the guy really meant to keep me locked in that room all night. I wasn't even mad at him. He had got to me. When I pulled out my phone to call my parents, it wasn't to rat him out. It was because I had no intention of staying in that room all night. No reception. I hadn't told my parents about detention, but knowing them, I figured they would put the pieces together soon enough. They would start calling my friends who did know about detention. I just hoped my friends wouldn't feel like they were ratting me out by telling my parents where I was. I walked over to the exterior window and held my phone up to it. Still, no reception. I tried to open the window, but it was jammed shut. I lit down to the parking lot below. People were leaving for the day. I thought about breaking the window and jumping for it, but I was on the second floor and it was way too far down into the pavement. Plus, I knew I would just get a bunch of crap for breaking school property. I tried to flick on the light switch, but the light didn't come on. And then, for the next hour, I did something that I'll never forgive myself for. I burned through my phone's battery playing some dumb game. I don't even remember what. As my phone lost battery, I looked up and noticed that the room was dark. The light coming through the window was getting dimmer and dimmer. It started to feel really eerie. I banged on the door for a while, trying to get someone's attention, but no one came. As the last bit of light faded away, I took one last look outside through the window. The parking lot was now empty. Now the room was very dark. I started to panic. I did not want to spend the night in that room, but it was looking like I didn't have a choice. After a bit of mindless pacing, I heard a click and the door to the classroom slowly swung open to the hallway, seemingly of its own accord. "Hello?" I asked into the darkness. "Mr. Hillrow, look, I've learned my lesson, really I have. I'm truly sorry for doing what I did." It was dead quiet, and I didn't see anybody there. That creeped me out, but I was happy to get out of the room at least. I walked down the hall, which was now lit up by a few dim lights up at the top of the wall. I knew where I was headed first, the bathroom. I'd had to go for like an hour and it was getting me now. I had thought about just taking it out and going all over Mr. Hurl's desk, but I figured that would only get me in more trouble. I was walking past a long row of lockers when I heard it. It started as a slight rattle coming from one of the lockers. I tried to play it off as just the building settling or something, but then another locker door started to rattle, and then another and another, and soon the whole row was rattling. When I heard a scraping sound, like something sharp being dragged against the metal of the locker doors, followed by what sounded like a low growl. That's when my urge to go to the bathroom was suddenly relieved, right down my leg. It's also when I started running like heck. As I ran down the hall, the rattling turned into banging. Now I could see the locker doors shaking, straining against the hinges and latches. Whatever terrible things were inside were on the verge of breaking free. All at once, the horrible sounds coming from the locker stopped, just as I came to the end of the hall. I didn't slow down though. I booked it down the stairs and only felt the slightest bit of relief when I saw the entrance to, and more importantly the exit from, the school in front of me. I ran full speed towards the door, putting my hand in front of me to push it open. A thunk. My wrist twisted painfully as it impacted the unmoving door. Of course it's locked, you idiot. It's nighttime. I tried to find a deadbolt latch or something, but there wasn't one. Just a keyhole. Why the heck do all these doors lock from the outside? I wondered, as I slumped down to the ground in pain, fearing what was beginning to look like utter defeat. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. Now that I was by the front entrance, I might get reception. If I hadn't been a dang idiot and used up all of my battery. I held the power button for a full 5 minutes straight before I gave up, and put the useless thing back in my pocket. I felt like crying. It was bad enough just being locked in there, but being locked in there with a bunch of locker monsters and who knows what else was much, much worse. I decided to stick by the front entrance and wait it out. I sat there in soiled pants for hours. I would start to get bored and even a little sleepy, and then I would hear a noise from somewhere in the school and it would jolt me into full alertness. Sometimes it was a soft rustling sound that I wasn't quite sure I was actually hearing, and sometimes it was a loud, unmistakable bang. Once I was sure that I had heard someone laughing. Finally, it got to the point where I couldn't ignore how hungry I was. The cafeteria was right by the entrance, so I figured I could risk it. I didn't have any money for the vending machine, but I thought that I might be able to get into the kitchen and scrounge up some food. I'd always wondered what the heck went on in there anyway. I turned the corner and was surprised to see that the cafeteria was brightly lit. I could smell something delicious wafting out from there. I took a cautious step and was shocked to see Miss Hadley, aka the lunch lady, standing there behind the counter in her hairnet. "Young man," she said when she saw me, "you're just in time." "Miss Hadley, what are you doing here?" I asked. "It's the middle of the night." The lunch lady laughed. "Oh, sometimes when I can't sleep, I come down here and try out a new recipe. And tonight, oh boy, I've come up with something out of this world. I think the children will love it." Something clicked in my addled mind. "So you have a key?" I asked. "You can let me out of here." "Of course I have a key, silly. But before you go, won't you try my newest dish? You look hungry." She was right about that. I mean, I was ready to get the heck out of there. But at least now I knew that I could get out of there. I didn't see the harm in chowing down first, especially since it smelled so good. I grabbed a tray and I held it out to her. Behind the counter, she scooped some mashed potatoes onto a plate, and then put a cut of juicy steak on there too. She put the plate on my tray. "Thanks," I said. "Let me know what you think," she said, smiling. I sat down and dug into the mashed potatoes. Dang, they were good. Just the right balance between fluffy and creamy, and a hint of garlic to top it off. And then I cut off a chunk of steak and I put it in my mouth. It was wonderful, but it didn't taste like any steak that I had ever had before. "Wow," I said. "This is great. What is it?" "Meat," said the lunch lady. "Oh yeah, I figured. What I meant was, what kind of?" A scream coming from back in the kitchen cut me off. Miss Hadley, can I go now?" "You don't like your meat, young man?" asked Miss Hadley, frowning. "Oh, no, it's great. It's just my parents are probably worried sick about me. I've been stuck here all night. Mr. Hillrow locked me in." Another scream. "What's that screaming?" I asked. "No, that'll be Lily, my assistant," said Miss Hadley. "She's forever burning herself, and if it isn't that, it's a slip of the knife. Clumsy girl, but has a great instinct for cooking." "Miss Hadley, can I please go?" "Very well, young man, I'll see you to the door." Just what I wanted to hear. A way out of the nightmare. When I got home, I would hug my parents, and then get in bed where it was nice and safe and sound and there were no weird sounds, or locker monsters or mystery meats. When we turned the corner and the entrance came into view, my heart first sank and then started beating like crazy. Standing in front of the door with his arms crossed was the janitor, except he didn't look like he looked during the day. During the day, he didn't have a bunch of spikes coming out of his head, for starters, and he also didn't have empty white holes where his eyes should be. He didn't have long claws during the day either, at least none that I had ever noticed. "Let the boy pass, Bob," said Miss Hadley. When Bob the janitor spoke, the sound didn't come out of his mouth. I was standing there facing him, and I heard his voice whispering behind me. "Afraid I can't do that, Miss Hadley. The boy shall not pass. Direct orders from you-know-who." Everything started to spin and I felt woozy. "Come on, dude," I groaned. "I gotta get home. I'm sorry about the prank, if that's what this is about. I'll never do anything like that again, I promise." I looked past the janitor monster and saw that it was starting to get light out. Even if I didn't make it out right then, it would only be a few more hours until school opened. And then I heard a hiss and I looked up in horror to see some kind of gas coming out of the air vents in the ceiling. And then I was out cold. So much crazy stuff has gone down in this crazy school building over the past 3 years. If I ever make it out of here, I'll tell the full story. But dawn is approaching and I don't have much time left. I'll give you the basics. Every day around dawn, the gas pours in through the vent and knocks me out. There's no way to stop it. I've tried. Next, I wake up in a dark room, which is actually a sort of sub-basement dug into the basement floor, and covered with a hidden hatch door during the day. At night, the hatch opens, and I'm free to wander the halls of the school if I choose. I never want to, but I have needs. I need to eat and use the bathroom. I need to shower in the locker room. I need to wash my clothes. I need to try and find a way out of this nightmare, even if it looks more and more like there is no way out. Plus, as bad as it is out in the school, it's miserable in my dark little hole too. If I stay there too long, I start to lose it. I have some theories about what is going on, but I won't get into them. A bit of light is coming in through the windows now. It's almost time for my lights to go out for the day. I'm at the computer lab now. I have very limited access to the internet, and it seems pretty random what sites I can and can't visit. I can't read any news, so I don't even know if anyone's out there looking for me, or if my entire existence has been forgotten since I got trapped in this place. Lately, I've come across this forum. This is, for some reason, the only place that I can read. I don't even know if I can post, but it's worth a shot. You guys seem like you've dealt with a lot of weird stuff, so maybe you'll take this seriously. Please help me. My name is Emmett Emerson. I am at CHAS in Claremont, Maine, United States. During the day, I'm in the sub-basement if you can find it. During the night, if you can somehow get in and make it past the janitor, I'm usually somewhere running away from monsters. Hi everyone. My name is Emmett Emerson, and I am stuck in what has to be the world's worst school detention. Regular detention sucks enough already, but I've been here for 3 years. Also, they keep me in a hole in the basement and usually only let me out at night. And at night, the monsters come out too. I don't mean that figuratively. I saw one of them take a kid's face off once. That wasn't at my last post, but his name was Jason. And just when I thought that we could team up and get out of this place, he wandered a little too close to one of the windows, and a wrangler got him. I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry about that. I'm just psyched that my last post actually made it through, and a flood of people responded. I've got hope for the first time in at least a year. And does it suck that some of you are telling me that there is no record of me existing online? You bet it does. Is it bad that some of you are telling me that my school burned down recently and that I went down with it? Again, yes, it stinks very much. I don't know if you're messing with me or if that stuff is true, but either way, it's at least good to hear from actual people again. Assuming you are real, this isn't just a trick set up by the school. The lunch lady isn't so bad, but she's a little out there. And Jason, like I said, I didn't get to know Jason very well before he got his face taken. Other than that, it's been mostly me, all alone with monsters for the past 3 years. Some others have come and gone, usually in a horrible way, but mostly I've been alone. So, if you read my last post, thank you, and thank you for trying to help. A lot of you offered up ways that I might escape. I've been here 3 years and I've tried pretty much everything that you guys have suggested. Some of these stuff took me years to come up with, so I'm kind of blown away that you all came up with it right away. If you were here as long as me, I'm sure a lot of you would have already found a way out by now. I thought about responding to all of the comments, but I figured it would be best to just continue my story. That way, you can see more of what I'm up against, and maybe you'll come up with some more theories and suggestions. So, here is how the second night went. When I woke up that second night, I had no idea where I was. I was groggy from the gas and it was pitch black. I started shouting for help. My voice went as soon as it left my mouth, sucked in by the walls of the room that I was in. I mean, I could hear myself, but there was absolutely no reverb. It was like the darkness was swallowing up the sound. I knew in my gut that nobody could hear me. After a few minutes, the memories of the previous night started to trickle in, and I felt the terror all over again. In 1 second, I was looking at the janitor, with those horrible crooked spikes growing out of his skull, and the next I was here. I kept shouting even though I knew it was useless, because it was all that I could do. After a few minutes, I heard a loud creak and a hatch door above my head slowly opened up. I wasted no time in crawling my way out of that hole. I found myself in what I assumed was the basement of the school. It was dark in there, but I could see the boiler in the corner, with a bunch of little neon lights buzzing away. I looked around in the darkness a bit for something useful, but it seemed like mostly junk. And then I saw it pressed up against the wall. I wetted myself for the second time in 2 nights. I could see the dark outline of massive claws and several insect-like legs. I took a step back and almost had a heart attack when I bumped into an old desk. Where are the stairs? I wondered, not idly. And then the room was suddenly flooded with lights and I almost laughed. It was an old dusty Louie the Lobster costume. Louie was our school mascot. Just this ridiculous, lumbering, fuzzy red thing. I turned around and saw the stairs. I was halfway there when I heard the snap. I whipped my head around. There was nothing there, just a bunch of old, useless junk. I'm starting to lose it, I told myself. Understandably so. I gotta get out of the school. I kept walking to the stairs, and this time, I heard 2 snaps and a skittering noise. Now when I turned around, I saw Louie the Lobster crawling towards me. His pinchers were going wild, opening and closing, hungry. I watched in a mixture of disbelief and horror as he crushed the desk that I had just bumped into, between his mighty claws. The desk splintered into thousands of pieces. I ran, taking these stairs 2 at a time. I heard a crunch and I felt the railing wobble. When I looked back, I saw that Louie had begun pulling himself up the railing, digging in with his claws and pushing off with his many legs, and he was moving fast. I had made it to the door just in time. I could feel the air rushing behind my butt as the snap of Louie's claws were silenced by the closing door. I kept running down the hall and back towards the entrance. I would break that door down if I had to. When I got to the door, I almost added some solid waste to go along with what was already in my pants. The janitor was there, mopping the floor, whistling away. His back was to me, and I was at least relieved to see that there were no spikes coming out of his head. But when he turned to look at me, I saw those same 2 empty white holes where his eye should be. "Can't walk here, bub," he said in that crazy whisper that didn't actually come from his mouth. "Wet floor, not safe." I didn't need any more convincing. No way was I prepared to take on the janitor, at least not then. I backed away, my mind whirling. The lunch lady, I thought. I mean, sure, she had fed me a cut of what was almost certainly human, but at least she had seemed willing to help me get out of here. I ran to the cafeteria. The lights were on, but I didn't see anybody there. "Hello?" No answer. I looked around and saw a tray of steaming food on one of the tables. There was a note next to it. I walked over and read it. "A growing boy needs his strength. Eat up, my dear. This is my best creation yet." On the tray was a big plate of some more of those awesome mashed potatoes, some beans, and some kind of soup. The soup was green, and something was floating on top. I didn't look closely enough to determine if it was a baby carrot or a finger. I picked up the bowl of soup and put it on a different table, and then I sat down and dug into the mashed potatoes and beans. It was all so delicious. I wolfed it all down. Now what, I wondered. The windows. The previous evening, I had been too chicken to jump out of a second-story window when Mr. Hilrow locked me into one of the classrooms. But way back then, I thought that I would just be here for a few hours. If I had known I was facing 3 years at least, I would have dove headfirst, letting the glass shards cut me up and letting me break a bone or two just to get out. I was ready to get out, and I was on the first floor, so I wouldn't have to worry about the broken bones part. I finished up the lunch lady special, or at least everything except the green soup, and I took my tray to the trash can. I decided on room 108. I had algebra there, and I knew that there is a big, tall window in that room. I crept on the hall, trying to sneak past the janitor, who was still pretending to mop that same spot on the floor. "The boy shall not pass," he said from behind me. "Thanks, dude." I made it to room 108 and I tried the door. It was unlocked. As soon as I had entered, the lights turned on. The first thing that I saw was the chalkboard. There was a piece of frickin' chalk just floating in the air, writing out a message, and it said, "A is for atrocity, B is for because, C is for child, D is for dared, E is for escape, and F is for, I think you know." I tried my best to pretend that I hadn't just seen that, and I turned to the window. What I saw there made the whole chalkboard thing look like a stroll in the park. Standing in front of the window was a hideous creature with gray and scaly skin, standing about as tall as an adult person. But it wasn't a person. It had maybe a dozen arms, like tentacles almost. Like a cross between tentacles and arms, just writhing away, feeling around. The thing had no eyes, but it had a nose. Or rather, 2 flat, oblong holes where the nose should be, and a mouth. A red tongue wiggled over crooked and sharp-looking fangs, like a worm dancing on knives. When I saw that first wrangler, at least that's what I call them, I went in my pants again for the 3rd time altogether. I booked it out of room 108, my mind screaming for some kind of way out. A phone, I thought. There's gotta be a phone. I know there is in the office. And getting into the office meant that I would have to pass by the janitor again. But his job just seemed to be blocking the front door, so I thought that I had a chance. At the school, there is a reception desk out in the open, right by the main entrance. Just behind it is the main office, and that's where they do the announcements. I figured there had to be a phone there. I mean, you call the school, then somebody's got to answer it, right? I kicked myself for not thinking it through the night before. I had wasted hours just sitting by the front entrance, waiting for school to open up again. It doesn't matter, I told myself. You figured it out now, and that's all that counts. I snuck past the janitor, and I made it to the door of the front office. There was a little window in the door, the same as most of the other doors in the school. I looked in and I couldn't see anything. It was dark in there. My brain screamed, too dark. Just as my hand was on the doorknob, I noticed a pinprick of light coming from inside the room. And that's when it hit me. It wasn't dark inside the room at all. The door was just covered in spiders. Thousands of pure black spiders, so dense that they looked like darkness itself. I released the door handle and I took a step back. I've always been terrified of spiders. In Maine, most spiders are harmless to humans, but these ones looked really nasty, and given all the other horrors in the school, I figured they would probably paralyze me with one bite, and then slowly take me out while I watched helplessly. But still, I had to see if there was a phone in there. I grabbed the door and opened it, just enough to have a look inside. There was a phone in there all right, crawling with spiders just like every other inch of the room. The walls, the ceiling, the floor. Spiders everywhere. On the floor, they were probably about a foot deep, crawling all over each other. Just this undulating black mass of massive, hungry spiders. Nope. I gently closed the door and walked away. There has to be another way. I wandered around the school in a terrified state. As I looked around, I saw a wrangler standing in front of each window. Their sickening appendages doing a slow dance, reaching and feeling for prey. Windows were out, unless I felt up to challenging one of those things. The front door was out unless I felt like taking on the janitor. The phone was out unless I could find a huge can of bug spray somewhere. But there had to be another way. What is this nightmare, I wondered. Is this all really because of the prank that I had put on Mr. Hilrow? Eventually, I found myself in the gym. I heard the echoing slap of a basketball repeatedly hitting the court, but I couldn't see anything. Ghost basketball. The hairs on my neck shot up and I hurried through, to the locker room. By then, I was already pretty ripe, and I needed to clean up. I walked warily past the row of lockers, remembering the locker monsters from the night before. Each one gave a gentle rattle as I walked past, letting me know they were in there, but not coming for me for the moment. There was an aluminum baseball bat propped up in the corner. I grabbed it and I headed for the showers. I washed myself with one hand, while I held the bat in the other, keeping my eyes peeled the whole time. And then I washed my clothes. When I was done, I dried myself off with a towel and dried my clothes off under the hot air blower, meant to dry your hands. It took forever, but by the time I was dressed again, I felt refreshed, and ready to take on the whole school and get out of here. And that's when the gas came in through the vent. So, that was night 2 out of what, 1,000 plus? I realize there's not much here to build grand theories on. I just wanted to give you guys more of a sense of what I'm up against here. This school does not want me to leave. As to who or what is behind all of this, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe next time I'll jump ahead a couple years and tell you about my time with Jason. That's when a few things started to click together for me, and maybe you guys can help me solve the puzzle. Meanwhile, please keep thinking of ways to help me out of here. It really stinks in here. On that note, I better get moving again. I'm going to try out later for Reddit so that I can post this during the day. I hope it works. And I hope that whatever's clacking its way down the hall towards the computer lab right now doesn't catch me, and do something like tear the eyeballs out of my head. It was never good news when the second hatch opened. The first time it happened, Robin Phillips emerged, still looking beautiful despite being covered in sweat and, I guess, something else. She threw a crazed look around the dark basement. "Come on," I said. "We better get moving." "Who the heck are you?" she shrieked, cowering away from me. I sighed. I had had a huge crush on Robin for 3 years, and now my worst fear was confirmed. She didn't even know I existed. Emmett Emerson, I said. I'm really sorry that this is happening to you, but we have to get out of this basement. There are bad things down here. There are bad things everywhere, but these ones are particularly aggressive. Robin started screaming, "Stay away from me." The overhead lights turned on. "We have to go right now," I said. Robin started sobbing. "What's happening?" "I'll explain later. Right now we have to go." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A red fuzzy flurry of movement. I grabbed Robin's arm. She bit my hand. "Don't touch me," she said. And that was the last thing she had ever said. As Louis the Lobster's a massive claw closed around her waist and cut her nearly in half. And then there was the kid who refused to come out of his hole. I did what I could for him. I brought him food and water. I told him lies like that everything was going to be okay. I did what I could, but it wasn't enough. One night I woke up and I looked in his hole and he was no more. And there had been a few others, Darren Fleming, for example, who thought that he could take on the janitor. He couldn't. Darren emptied the fire extinguisher in the janitor's face and then swung the empty canister against the beast's head. None of it did anything, and one headbutt from that spiked head was enough to end Darren. Or not exactly. Darren is still here, and so is Robin, and the handful of other kids unlucky enough to end up in this place. They wander the hallways as ghosts, moaning in despair. Even in death, there is no escape from this place. Talk about a crap sandwich. Though I've eaten things here worse even than that. When I saw that second hatch open again, over 2 years into this nightmare, I thought it was going to be another instant goner. I was at the point where I couldn't allow myself to hope anymore. And it was a terrible feeling knowing that whoever came out of that hole wasn't going to make it very long. I reached down to give him a hand. Even in the dark, I had recognized him. Jason Porter. He had been a freshman when I first got locked up in here, which would make him a junior now. We had talked a few times and he had seemed cool. "Listen, Jason," I said. "We have to get the heck out of the basement now." "Sounds good," said Jason. I had it down to where I could already have my hand around the basement door by the time that the lights flicked on, and Louis the Lobster became animated. Jason slowed me down a little, but we made it out with time to spare. "You mind telling me what the heck is going on?" asked Jason, as I closed the basement door behind him. "Like for starters, who are you and how do you know my name?" "You don't remember me?" I asked, disappointed. "I thought we had vibed. That was a couple years ago, though." "I never seen you in my life, dude," said Jason. And that's when it finally occurred to me. Even if he or the others didn't remember me personally, they had to have heard about my disappearance, right? Claremont, Maine is a small town after all. "My name is Emmett Emerson," I said. "You haven't heard anything about me. I was a year ahead of you. We had talked a couple of times. More than that, I disappeared from the face of the earth a little over 2 years ago. Ring any bells?" Jason shook his head. "Wait," he said. "Let me guess, detention, right? You got detention with Miss Falloway, and then you woke up here." "Christ, you've been in here for 2 years?" "Not Miss Falloway," I said. "Mr. Hilrow." I dressed up a little thing like him and mentioned it as a funny name. But other than that, yeah. Detention, then the monsters, then the gas. 2 years of that. Jason was cracking up. "What? That's hilarious. That guy is awful." For me, it was just a harmless fart. Okay, it was on somebody, but he thought it was funny too. Wasn't a big deal. But Miss Falloway lost it. And then she gave me some kind of speech during detention. Locked me in the room and sounds like you know the rest. but if you've been here 2 years, gosh. I nodded. The kids seemed to grasp the severity of the situation at least. You hungry? I asked. Let's set up the cafeteria and I'll fill you in. Jason opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. I saw the color drain out of his face, and then he finally spoke in a whisper. Is that a monster? He asked, pointing. I tensed up and turned to look, and then I relaxed. No, I said, that's just Lily. Lily came hobbling down the hall, dragging the foot that was missing all of its toes behind her. A tray of food balanced dangerously on her one hand. Cafeteria closed again? I said. I'm afraid so, Emmett, said Lily, handing off the tray to me. A fire? I asked. Or rats? A little from column A, a little from column B, said Lily. I looked Lily over carefully. I didn't notice any new body parts missing, which combined with what she had just told me, meant that the burgers on the tray were probably from rats. You get used to it. Thanks, Lily, I said. Give our regards to Miss Hadley. Lily hobbled away and we sat down on a bench and caught up while we ate. Cell phone? Asked Jason, taking a big bite of the burger. Mine's dead, I said. Yours? Miss Falloway took it during detention and then walked off with it. How about landlines, like in the main office? Spiders, I said. Maybe 1 million of them. I've raided the chemistry room and thrown everything I could find at them. I think they've only gotten bigger though. Internet, asked Jason. At the computer lab. Very limited, I said. It's a crapshoot on which sites actually work. And I haven't found one yet where you can communicate with people. Windows. Never the windows, I said. Windows are out of the question. Stay away from the windows. Fire alarms, asked Jason. Don't do a thing this time of night. The gas, it comes out of the vents every morning, said Jason. That's right. And I've tried every trick in the book, training myself to hold my breath. I've got up to 4 minutes, but it wasn't enough. Have you tried leaving notes? Asked Jason. Like in the lockers. You haven't seen the locker monsters yet, I said. Oh, said Jason. Right. I haven't tried it myself, but I saw one girl do it. That was the only glimpse of an actual locker monster that I've gotten. The girl went to slip the notes in the little vents there and the door swung open. This tiny green arm shot out of the darkness and pulled her in, slamming the door behind her. I heard her screaming in there. Even tried to open the locker, but it was closed tight. The screaming didn't last long. Oh, said Jason, shoveling in a spoonful of mashed potatoes. What about a note somewhere else? Somewhere that's not obvious. I've tried it all. I carved a message into a desk. The next night, I saw that desk down in the basement, and a different one was in its place upstairs. I wrote on the walls in Sharpie. The next night, it's gone. The janitor goes around and cleans everything up. I did write one message that's still there, but it's on the underside of Mr. Hilro's desk. I took out all the drawers and I wrote it there. It works, sure, but who the heck is ever going to see that? Jason finished his burger and burped. Oh crap, he said. How's the library looking? Not good, I said. I've only been there a couple of times, I'll just say this. You don't want those bookworms crawling inside you. What they do when they get in, it's not right. And where they come out once they're ready to leave. Jason frowned. What kind of grades were you pulling before you got locked up in here? C's pretty much, I admitted. Same here. We need that library. We're not smart enough to do this on our own. But the bookworms, I said. Well, it sounds like we got a couple different infestations around here, said Jason. We got the monsters and we got the spiders. Don't see anything we can do about that right now, and you haven't already tried. And then we got the bookworms and the rats. What if we catch the rats and then set them out as bait for the bookworms? I had to admit, it was a brilliant plan. I mean, he didn't know that the rats were our only main source of protein, with Lily being a distant second, and I didn't have the heart to tell him just then. So it was a brilliant plan, and I was glad to have somebody in it with me, who was eager to get the heck out of here with me, but in a smart way, or as smart a way as we could muster between us. "Let's do it," I said. We caught hundreds of rats in a big trash can and set them loose in the library, peeking through the window and the door over the course of the week. The rat trick worked. Soon the hundreds of rats were covered in millions of worms. That was our chance to grab a crapload of worm-free books. We didn't know what we were looking for. We had been so reliant on the internet our entire lives. If we ever wanted to know anything, we would just Google it. Now we didn't even know what we wanted to know. We just grabbed a bunch of books that looked like they might be useful. We got books about spiders, books about the paranormal, books about the local history of our town, books on construction, science books, and so on. While I was there, I found a copy of the yearbook from my freshman year. I wasn't in there. I showed it to Jason, who found a copy of the yearbook from his freshman year. Neither of us were in it. We collected dozens of books and in a mad dash past Louis the Lobster, dumped half of them down into my hole, and half of them with his, so that we would have them there with us. And after that, we read. We read and we wandered the school, and we talked. Jason had ended up with the local history bits. "You know," he said one day, as we passed by the moaning ghost of poor Robin Phillips, "I've noticed something really weird. This book I'm reading, it keeps mentioning this one family is sort of starting this town, and sort of running things for hundreds of years. The Haldros." "Yeah?" I asked, making sure to walk in the exact center of the hallway, the maximum distance allowable from the locker monsters on either side of us. "Haldro. It doesn't ring any bells." "Well, here's the weird thing. There's a lot of sketches of the husband and wife who founded the town, and then there are photographs of the descendants. And you know who they all kind of look like?" I had an idea, but I didn't say it. "Who's that?" "Miss Hilrow and Miss Falloway," said Jason. I shuddered. "Okay, so..." "Well, if you take Hilrow and Falloway and sort of put them together, it would be kind of like Haldro, right?" "Okay," I said. "I understand, but I still don't see where you're going with this. How'd you even come up with this?" "Well, there's something else," said Jason. "The book is really weird. Most of the time it stays the same, but at exactly midnight, one of the pages, it changes. It's the one about the way back history, the one with the sketch of the founders of Claremont. Suddenly, the sketch becomes clear, not like a photograph, but almost. And it's Mr. Hilrow and Miss Falloway there, sure as crap, both looking upset. And then the words change." Jason swallowed hard and went on. "It's not about setting up a shipping route or whatever anymore. Now it's this weird religious stuff, talking about how God is disappointed in our perversions, and is establishing Claremont as the last refuge for the holy or whatever. The violators of God's holy word will be punished for their sins, and to do that, the Haldros are willing to strike a deal with the devil." We pressed up against a wall as we passed a wrangler, and Jason finished up. "I mean, it's not just the words that change. The whole thing is now written out by hand, in this crazy old-timey talk. I've had to read it a bunch over the past 3 midnights. First, to make sure that it's real, and second, to sort of translate what's being said." I felt dizzy. "Okay," I said after a while. "So what? Mr. Hilrow and Miss Falloway are really Mr. and Mrs. Haldro. And they're what? Immortal beings who've been around for hundreds of years. And this whole BS school is the way of punishing people who fart in class. Is that what you're telling me? Seems a little extreme." Jason shrugged. "The page talks about somebody else too. Not the devil and not a Haldro. You know who." this person is called. Apparently, they're the one running the whole thing, whatever it is. I thought back to my first night there. The janitor had said, "The boy shall not pass. Direct orders from you-know-who." I shuddered again. "Good work, man," I said. "I've been reading some stuff too. This construction book's got me thinking. Maybe we're taking the wrong approach here, hoping for an open window or an open door. Maybe what we do is just try to smash through this thing. If all of it is drywall and insulation, maybe some wires in there, and then brick on the outside. It's pretty simple actually. Can't believe I didn't think of it before. Maybe because I knew that something would try to stop us. But if there's two of us, I think we could do it." "Sounds good, man," said Jason. "Let's do it." Over the next week, we planned it out. We found the perfect spot, far away from any windows, any lockers, and the front door. Far away from where the usual monsters lurked. We figured that would give us a head start, and with any luck, we would smash through to fresh air before they came for us. There was always random monsters roaming around like the hall monitor, which was a skeleton with two huge swords that would start running after you as soon as it saw you, to name one. But we couldn't control for that. We had a good plan, but we needed luck too. Our plan after all that time was really simple. We would each grab 2 baseball bats from the locker room, go to our designated spots, and start smashing away. I still think it could have worked, with the two of us. Everything's so much harder when you're alone. But that night, I didn't start out alone. I went to the locker room with Jason and grabbed 2 bats. I was scared, and I was running on pure adrenaline, trying not to think at all. I was on my way out when Jason stopped me. "I've been saving this for a special occasion," he said. He reached behind the lockers where there is a gap between the wall and the back of the lockers, and pulled out a bottle of Captain. I figured we needed a little courage tonight. I'd only drank a couple of times. I knew that it would give us courage but also make us clumsy. "I don't know, man," I said. "Don't you think we should be sharp?" "Sure," said Jason, unscrewing the cap, "but not too sharp. What if it comes down to a split second? A monster's coming and we've got just one more brick to smash. If we get scared, we don't make it. This is all or nothing, man. This is it. We've got to be loose for it, you know." I don't know if I agreed or not, but after he finished taking a long drink, I had a nap. It burned the back of my throat, and the warmth spread out inside my body. I had another nip and then handed the bottle back. "Okay," I said, feeling the rush. "Let's do this." "Hold on," said Jason. "One more." He tilted the bottle back and took 2 long swallows. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it." I led the way, my heart pounding in my chest. This is it, I thought. I'm either getting out of here or this is the end. I heard one of Jason's bats tap against the floor, and I turned around. He was weaving slightly as he walked. "Shh," I said. "Come on, man, you gotta be quiet." We passed a row of lockers, and I was relieved to see that the locker monsters were no more agitated than usual. I saw the big hall window up ahead, and once we got past that, we were past the stationary monsters. But we never made it past that window. Not the two of us anyway. I heard Jason scream as one of his bats clattered to the ground. I clutched both of my bats and turned to look at what I already knew what was happening. The Wrangler had a tentacle arm wrapped around one of Jason's legs, and each of his arms dragged him closer to its hideous, eyeless face. I made a step towards them and I swung wildly. The Wrangler caught my bat in one of its tentacle arms and pulled it away from me. There was nothing that I could do. The Wrangler lifted Jason into the air upside down, so that their faces were inches apart. It sniffed Jason through its 2 ungodly nostril holes, and then stuck out its redworm tongue and licked him. The Wrangler pulled Jason even closer, and I took a swing with my remaining bat, but my weapon was pulled easily from my hands. The Wrangler opened its maw and sunk its fangs into Jason. I watched helplessly, with tears streaming down my own face, and Jason's face was gone. And then I was alone again. After Jason was gone, I stayed in my hole for 2 days, sick with grief, for Jason and for myself. We could have done it together. I can't do it alone. I've worked it through 1,000 times in my head. I can't do any of it alone anymore. That's why I'm so grateful for all of you out there reading this, offering suggestions. Like I said, I've tried most of them, but going through the comments, I do see a few ideas that I haven't tried yet. Maybe I'll give them a shot tomorrow night. Meanwhile, writing this has been rough. I think I'm going to go to the locker room and find the rest of that captain. Pour one out for my dude. I'm gonna get out of this nightmare, buddy. And then I'm gonna track down you-know-who and shut this place down. I farted into the bag, and then I sat down in the seat where it all started. My seat in Mr. Hilro's class, where I had gotten detention for dressing up a you-know-what to look like him. I took a deep breath from the air around me and held it. I watched the second-hand mover on the clock. 1 minute, no problem. 2 minutes, not breaking a sweat yet. 3 minutes, there's the strain. I knew I could make it to 4 minutes most of the time. At 3 minutes and 50 seconds, I opened the bag and I inhaled the fart. When I woke up on the floor, I knew that it wasn't going to work. Apparently, farts don't contain as much oxygen as I had hoped. Well, that stunk, but good to know. It's why I was practicing in the first place. I pulled the paper out of my pocket. I had written down one of the comments from my second post here, because it seemed really smart and fairly safe and was something that I hadn't tried yet. Someone suggested trying to fill garbage bags up with oxygen through various different ways, so I thought that I would go with that. It was great thinking, but unfortunately, I couldn't make the suggestion work. For starters, we didn't have a shop class. I actually remember my freshman year when Mr. Hilro led a campaign to end it, claiming that the point of school was to build minds, not to turn students into blue-collar workers. By the way, that's how I first came to know of him as being mean, because by all accounts, shop class was fun and easy. Anyway, I just couldn't grab an oxygen tank from a welding rig in shop class. As far as creating a reaction in the chemistry lab went, I just didn't have the necessary stuff. Every so often, I would go around throwing various liquids and powders from there on various lesser monsters like the million spiders in the main office, and hope that they would explode or shrivel up or something. And they never did. So I ran through the stock, and it always took a while for the school or the janitor or whoever to replenish it. The third suggestion was to create oxygen with water and a DC power source. All I'll say about that is that I shocked myself 7 times trying it, and didn't get any oxygen as far as I know. But the creativity of all of the comments plus the specific premise of that one inspired me to come up with my own idea. If I couldn't find oxygen anywhere else, I would just fart into a bag and use that. As you can tell, it didn't work. But after all of that support and encouragement that you have all given me, I wasn't about to give up. I racked my brain to make the general idea work. And then I had it. I found a basketball in the locker room and I stabbed it with a pen. I put my finger over the hole and held my breath. And then, when I couldn't hold it any longer, I put my mouth to the hole and inhaled. And this time it worked. At first, during the practice run, and then later when the gas came, I stayed awake. I opened one eye a sliver and looked down to see the unmistakable work boots of the janitor. I was slung over his shoulder. So that's how I get down to the sub-basement every morning, I thought. That mean guy carries me himself. In my hand, I held the wad of old chewing gum that I had tediously scraped from under a whole lot of desks. I heard a door open, and then we were going downstairs into the basement. I heard the creak of my hatch door open. As the janitor was lowering me in, I opened my eyes under their hair and I took my shot. I stuck the wad of gum into the latch on the hatch door, and then I was on the floor and the door was closing. I waited. I had spent 3 years in that place, but this felt like the longest wait yet. In reality, it was only a couple of hours, but it felt like forever. Finally, I reached up and I tried the hatch door. It was heavy, but it opened. My trick had worked. The gum had prevented the latch from catching. I crawled out of my hole into the familiar basement that I had seen so many times. There as always was Louie the Lobster pressed up against the wall. Out of habit, I started running to the stairs, but something stopped me. It should be morning now. The school should be full of people. The monster should be gone. I walked over to Louie the Lobster and I poked him. I almost laughed. During the day, he was just a dumb costume. But then I thought about what Louie had done to my crush, Robin Phillips, and it wasn't so funny anymore. I grabbed a fuzzy red leg and I tore it off. "Take that," I said as quietly as my adrenaline would allow. I tore off another leg. "Take that, you crustaceous freak." And then I went for the claws, tearing one of them at the joint. Like Louie, was a lobster dinner. "See you later, Louie." Again, I guess. I felt good until I got to the top of the stairs. Now what? What if Mr. Hilrow saw me out there? Or somebody else was in on it? Was the janitor in on it? During the day, I remembered, he looked just like a regular person. It was only at night when he turned into a crazy demon thing. The janitor, or so I thought. I needed a distraction. I knew that there was a fire alarm right next to the basement door. I opened the door up, reached over, and I pulled it. As the alarm blared and the lights flashed, I hurried down the hall. Sunlight was pouring in through the windows. There wasn't a wrangler to be seen. After all that time, I walked right out the front door. My car keys were in my backpack, which had been eaten by a giant electric blob in the pool room a year or so back, so I had to walk. I stayed off the main roads and I stuck to the woods. I got scraped up by branches and whatnot, but I didn't even feel it. All I felt was the joy of finally getting out of that school, tempered only by the creeping feeling that it wasn't real, that they would find me, that they would hunt me down and drag me back. But they didn't. At least not before I emerged from the woods at the clearing where my house stood. Man, that was a good sight. There weren't any cars in the driveway, which meant that my parents probably weren't home, but that was okay. They would be back, I figured. I lifted the rock on the porch and sure enough, the spare key was still there. I stuck it in the door and I opened it up. As I went in, I got the sense that something was off. It took a while to hit me, but I finally got it. All of the pictures of me were gone from the walls. I hurried up the stairs and swung open the door to my room. And it wasn't my room anymore. There was a desk there and a bunch of bookcases overflowing with books. I sat down in the office chair, my head spinning. Okay, I thought. I should have expected it. After all, Jason hadn't remembered me, and neither had any of the other kids. Even if they didn't know me by sight or from school, they should have at least heard of my disappearance. So, I should have expected my existence to have been somehow erased from the outside world. I had no idea how or why, but I knew that it had been. I stood up on weak knees and started pacing the room, trying to figure out what to do. If my parents didn't remember me, then what? But they had to remember me, right? Christ, I had lived with them for 16 years. As I was pacing, I saw it on a bookshelf, on top of a row of books. It was the name written in black Sharpie that caught my eye. Emmett. I ran over and grabbed it. It was one of those single, burnable CD, DVD cases from back when people used to burn discs. There was a disc in it, but the same thing written on the surface as it was written on the spine of the case. Emmett. I walked it over and I popped it into the computer on the desk. The screen lit up and it asked me for a password. Screw it, I thought. and I typed out Emmett. It worked, and the video started playing. It was a video of me. First, I was cracking up at my joke bit, and then Mr. Hilrow was giving me detention. And then I was in detention. And then I was trapped. The cameras followed me down every hall and into every room. They recorded my entire first night trapped in that school. And then there was something else. It was daytime again. Mr. Hilrow wheeled a TV into the classroom. Today for class, we will be watching a video. The camera panned across the classroom. All the kids looked relieved. Video days, as rare as they were, always ruled. I heard a hiss and watched as the camera pointed up to the vents, where a green gas rolled in like fog. This was different than the gas that knocked me out every night. That was white. Now the camera was pointing at the TV screen. Mr. Hilrow was standing next to it, wearing what looked like a military-grade gas mask. He turned the screen on. A man in an awful red mask appeared on the TV. The mask was like a horribly distorted human face with no eye holes. The eyes were meant to look like they had melted shut, with one down near a cheek and the other up by the forehead. There was an unsettling ear-to-ear grin, and the ears themselves were bad too. One was only half of an ear, and the other was pointed like an imp's ear. At least I thought it was a mask. When the low, gravelly voice issued forth, I wasn't so sure. Mehmet Emerson does not exist, said the demonic voice in the screen in Mr. Hilrow's class. You have never met him. All memories of him are false. Destroy those memories, for he has never existed. There is no such person as Emmett Emerson. He is not your classmate, and never was. The camera panned back to the students. Their eyes were wide open and glazed over. As one voice, they repeated, Emmett Emerson does not exist. And then the video ended. I was freaked right the heck out. At least now I knew why nobody from school remembered me. But what about my parents? And what was this video doing in their house? I tore through what used to be my clothes closet looking for something, anything that could help me get a grasp on what was going on. And that's where I found the mask. The same mask from the video. Just as something important was starting to click into place in my mind, I heard a voice behind me. You must understand, son. You were never to be harmed, only kept locked in. I spun around to see my dad, and all at once it hit me, like I somehow knew it all along. He was you-know-who. I felt dizzy and sick and then puked all over the rug. Dad, you kept me locked up in that school. Why? My dad sighed. I had to. The prophecy was too close to fulfillment, and I couldn't let that happen. You were only meant to be captive until the portal fully opened, which should actually be any day now. Then you would take your place by my side. You were never meant to be harmed, and I insisted that you have free reign at night. Mr. Heldrow, you know him as Mr. Hilrow, wanted to keep you in the sub-basement all this time, but I wouldn't allow it. Not my son. Not my Emmett. My dad gave a nice fatherly smile when my mind spun like crazy. Prophecy portal. My place by his side. What in the world? But still, there was one thing that I knew for sure. That school had done bad things. It had taken my buddy Jason, and who knows how many others. Why did anybody have to go in that place? I asked. You got rid of them, didn't you, Dad? Or you knew that they would go? My dad sighed again. The school must be fed, son. At least until the portal is fully opened. What portal? I asked. It will all be clear soon, son. Until then, I'm very sorry. It breaks my heart, but I must bring you back to school and you must stay in the sub-basement. Not for long, but it's what must happen. I couldn't believe it or process it. My knees were weak and I felt on the verge of passing out. And that's when I saw him come up behind my father. It was the janitor there in my house, with his spiked head and the white absence of eyes. "Come on now, bub," said the janitor, reaching out to me. "It's time to be getting back." So that was it. I was going to live the rest of my life in that dang high school. I closed my eyes and felt that familiar warmth spread out across my body once again. And then I heard a bang that made my ears ring. I thought that I had heard a thunk, but I wasn't sure. I slowly opened one eye and looked down to see the janitor lying face down on the floor, with a hole oozing from the back of his head. I watched in amazement as his body shriveled up, and then blinked out into nothingness over the course of a few seconds. I looked up and I saw my mom standing there, pointing it at my dad, who had his hands up in the air. Now, Faye, take it easy," said my dad. Faye, my mom, reloaded. "Wait!" I shouted. I didn't know at the moment whether I wanted my dad gone or not. I didn't know much of anything at that moment. "Please tell me what's going on, Mom." My mom lifted it up and brought the butt down on my dad's head. He slumped to the ground. "Come on," she said. "Help me tie him up and get him to the car. We have to hurry. It'll be dark soon." I still don't know everything, and I can't tell you everything that I do know, at least not right now. But I'll try to sum up what my mom told me as we drove around town like crazy gathering up supplies, while my dad sat unconscious and tied up in the back seat. I'll fill that in with a few things that I've learned since. A couple hundred years ago, my parents were on the run from the law. They hid out in the woods in the place that would later become Claremont, Maine, and built their cabin near the spot that would later become the high school. One night, while they were outside cooking dinner over the fire, they saw a strange glow coming out from under a rock. They rolled the rock aside, and all of a sudden, they heard voices in their heads, telling them things. They had found the portal. At the time, it was tiny, like the size of a quarter. I don't know if it was a portal to a different universe, or just someplace far away in our own. I do know that it was a portal to some horrible place, full of bad things trying to make their way to our world. The voices in my parents' head told them that if they helped nurture the portal, and eventually open it fully, they would be granted immortal life and unimaginable powers. The voices said that my parents must build a structure around the portal to house the creatures that, one by one, would come through it every night, and those creatures must occasionally be fed. And if they did this, over the course of hundreds of years, the portal would become larger and larger, until one day it would finally open wide, and the barrier between worlds would dissolve completely in an instant. That is, unless the prophecy came true. That was me. I was the prophecy. The firstborn son would place the object into the portal, closing it permanently. At some point, the Haldros came wandering through the woods. My dad was wearing that creepy red mask, doing some kind of ritual when the Haldros found him. They were on some kind of crazy missionary work, looking to set up a school of God's highest word and devotion. My dad pretended to be the devil and duped them into building and maintaining the school for him. They were all too happy to help, believing that they were doing the Lord's work, and getting immortality too. That's how it started. For hundreds of years, my parents avoided having any kids, in order to prevent the prophecy from coming true. And then they drank a little bit too much one night, and whoops, here comes Emmett. That's me. The voices told my parents to get rid of me right away. Obviously, they didn't listen, instead deciding to watch me carefully. And then one day, they knew that there was no longer any avoiding the truth. The prophecy would come true unless they did something. My mom begged my dad to do nothing, to let the prophecy come true and close the portal. As she begged him, the voices inside her head raged, and she pushed them down. My dad thought there was a way to have it all. All he had to do was keep me locked away until the portal opened fully. But my mom was resolved. She wouldn't let him do that. So my dad did to her what he did to everyone else in that town. He erased all memory of me from her mind. He went around the house and removed all evidence that I had ever been there. And it worked. Until she took one look at me, standing there in my old room, and it all came flooding back to her. And that's when she took out the janitor. We pulled up in front of the school. It was dark out, but I hope that the monsters weren't out yet. I hope that they were still on the other side of the portal. If they were out, we were in trouble. We took the keys from my dad and headed in. I couldn't believe that I was going back in there after just getting out, but it had to be done. We walked slowly through the building, checking for monsters, and we locked it. They weren't out yet. Then, we were in front of the janitor's closet. In the 3 years that I had been locked up there, that was the one door that I never opened. It was always locked, and there was always this green light coming from the crack under the door. That's where the portal was. "Are you ready, honey?" asked my mom, pointing at the door. I nodded, stuck the key in, and swung it open. We were too late. A big hole of crackling green energy was suspended in the closet, getting larger by the second. A wrangler was just crawling out of it, reaching its horrible tentacle arms, feeling for prey. My mom fired but missed the head, and then the wrangler had her, wrapping her neck and her arms and her legs. "Mom," I shouted. "Do it, Emmett," she gasped. "Quickly." I turned to do it, but there was already another wrangler there, and before I could think, it had me. We weren't going to make it. We were going to get our faces taken like Jason. I felt the wrangler squeeze me in a dozen different places, pulling me closer, and I closed my eyes. "I love you, Mom," I said. "I love you," my mom whispered with what sounded like her last breath. And then I felt the wrangler's grip loosen, and I opened my eyes. Standing there with a huge butcher's knife in each hand was Miss Hadley, aka the lunch lady. Right behind her was Lily, but she only had one knife because she only had one arm. They were hacking away at the wrangler that had been getting ready to attack me. "Nasty old things," said Miss Hadley. "Aren't they, Lily?" "Yes, ma'am," said Lily. "I reckon they would make a fine stew, though." I had one chance. I pulled the object from my pocket, but I still called it what got me in trouble in the very beginning. I shoved it, still dressed in its tiny glasses and tiny necktie, into the crackling green hole. There was a terrible shriek unlike anything I had ever heard. The portal grew massive and bright for a second, and then shrunk away into nothingness. It was gone. I looked over to my mom and saw the wrangler shrivel up and disappear. She was in rough shape but alive. I slumped to the ground in relief. We had done it. We had closed the portal for good. I wish I could call that the end, but it's not. There are portals like this all over the world. Once the portal at the high school closed, the voices in my dad's head lost most of their power. He can't believe that he locked me in that school. But it wasn't him, and it took a whole lot of willpower just to keep him from attacking me. The voices are still there, whispering echoes from other portals. We're going to find them and close them all. But now that the strongest voices are gone, my parents have also lost their immortality. I really shouldn't be posting this at all, but I couldn't leave you all hanging, thinking that I was still stuck in the school. After this, I do have to go in the DL for a while, so this will be my final update, at least for the foreseeable future. I do have one more thing to tell you. We're on our way to meet up with another team. There's a kid there. You might know him as Calvin Dunlop. He posted his story here a few months back. Apparently, the groups that he's been fighting have been deep in this whole thing too, so we're teaming up. Calvin wants you to know that he's doing just fine. He wishes that he could update you, but it's too dangerous. I know it's dangerous, but like I said, I had to get this last one out to you. Calvin says that you guys are the best, and I agree. You guys gave me the courage and hope and creativity I needed to get out of that nightmare. And if I hadn't, and that portal had fully opened, well, that probably would have meant the end of the world. So, you guys literally saved the world. Thanks. I recently graduated from a CDL school and decided to get a job relating to my field. After applying to every job that involved driving large vehicles that I could find, I got a reply about an hour later for a bus driver position at Frederickson High School. The message read, "Hello, George. We have reviewed your application and have decided that you would be perfect for our position. Your first day will start tomorrow. Your bus's number is 458, and it is located at a bus yard on 207 Riverside Street. You can arrive at the bus yard at any time, but please arrive at the school before 4 a.m. This is when these students get dismissed. Once these students enter the bus, you can deliver them to their 5 stops on Old Military Road." Ernest Fredrickson, principal of Frederickson High School. I was a bit confused on why there was no interview, but nevertheless, I took the job anyway, not wanting to look at what I thought was a gifted horse in the mouth. I also thought that it was weird that these school hours took place during the night, but I assumed that the school operated 24 hours a day, dividing students and teachers into 4 groups for each shift to follow social distancing guidelines, or just for efficiency in general. At around 3:15 a.m., I got into my rusty 1974 Ford F-250 and drove to the address listed in the message. It wasn't that far away, about a 15-minute drive. I arrived at a vehicle gate next to a guard shack. The bus yard consisted of a flat slab of dirt with several buses parked at the back, with a large space in the front to allow for maneuvering the buses into the spots. Surrounding the yard was a fence, with the aforementioned gate and shack replacing a part of the fence. The guard in the shack was startled by my arrival and proceeded to open the window slightly. Who are you?" he asked. Hello," I replied. "I'm George Redwood. I'm here for bus 458. Are you okay?" He picked up a piece of paper, looking at it briefly before putting it down. He then passed me a key I presumed was for my bus. "Okay, sir, here's your key. Find your bus and replace its parking spot with your truck. Then you can go." The gate then opened and I did as he had asked. I drove my truck through the gate, got out to find my bus, and then drove my bus to the front of the yard and I parked it in a corner. I then walked back to my truck and parked it in my bus's original spot, before going back to my bus and driving it back to the gate. My bus was one of those buses with the flat front, the engine in the back, and it had the driver in front of the front wheels. I don't know what the official name of this design is. I noticed that the bus I was given had many dents and scratches, mostly on the front bumper, but I didn't think much of it and I started my shift anyway. I arrived at the school at 3:47 a.m. I noticed that there was only one bus for the school, that being mine. This school was very small, so it made sense why there was only one bus. While I waited for the students to be dismissed, I found a list of rules along with a map and the gap between the steering wheel and the windshield. Rules for Frederickson High School busing. You must follow these rules in driving on Old Military Road. We cannot ensure your safety if you break any of these rules. 1. Do not use any electronic devices for navigation. They will try to deceive you. We printed out a map for you to follow. 2. The bus stops that you can drop kids off at are labeled as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These stops resemble a bench with 3 walls with a roof, with the opening being on the front. The bus stop's number will be on both sides of all 3 walls. If you stop at a bus stop that is not one of the above, leave the stop immediately and continue your journey. Try not to look at anything nearby a fake stop, besides checking a wall to see if it's a valid stop. 3. The road is supposed to be very old, windy, and unmaintained. If the road suddenly changes to a straight road that appears to be newly paved, and the scenery starts repeating, immediately slam on the brakes and turn around before it's too late. Once the road starts curving again, and the straight part is no longer visible, you can turn around and continue your journey. If turning around is not possible, shift the bus into reverse and drive until you either find a place to turn around or the road returns to normal. 4. If the road reaches a dead end, turn around or reverse until the end of the road is no longer visible, similar to Rule 3. 5. If the road merges with another road, remember which side you came from. This will be important if you have to turn around. Do not drive on the road that you did not come from. 6. If any other vehicles appear in the road, disable them by any means possible. I don't care about minor damage to the bus. You can easily bash through any cars or light trucks, but be careful around larger vehicles that could put up a fight. Do not drop off any students if your bus is currently being perused by any vehicles, or you disabled one recently and it crashed near a bus stop. 7. If your bus gets stuck for whatever reason, alert the students and they'll know what to do. There is a handgun in the glove compartment near the steering wheel. Use it to defend the bus if they attempt to get in. Wait in the bus until dawn, and then contact us to get you out of there. No pay will be deducted if this happens. 8. If you hear a church bell, avoid going towards the source. If it's behind you, you're good. If it's on your side or in front of you, turn around and get as far away as you can until the ringing stops. Once you can no longer hear the bell, you can turn around and continue your journey. This usually doesn't last long. 9. If you see a creature on your right running parallel to your bus, do not under any circumstances open any doors or windows. While it will always run at the speed of your bus, you can confuse it by constantly accelerating and decelerating. Doing that may allow you to get into a position in which you can run it over. This is the only known way to stop it. 10. If the engine stops for seemingly no reason, immediately start it up again and floor it. Do not look at what is behind the bus. If that doesn't work, refer to Rule 7 for everyone's safety. 11. If you see a human on the road, run it over, even if it resembles a loved one. It's not a human. If you fail to run it over, skip any remaining stops and return to the bus yard as quickly as possible. Do not, under any circumstances, open any doors or windows. If you have to turn around for whatever reason, do so as quickly as possible. Despite the fact that you likely won't see it again, it is still following you. Once you arrive at the bus yard, alert the guard. They'll know what to do. 12. If you see a mansion in the distance, turn off all lights and floor it. None of our students live here. Its position on the road changes often, sometimes not appearing at all. The owners are deaf, but they can still see. The part of the road directly in front of the mansion is straight, and you can turn your lights back on once you're surrounded by forest again, so you'll be fine. This mansion is at least twice as tall as the forest, and it emits light from the room, so if you pay attention, you can spot it from far enough away that you can turn off your high beams and headlights before they notice the light. If you see a ridiculously bright light behind you, they saw you. If this happens, put on the modified sunglasses in the glove compartment and get out of there as quickly as you can. The students are prepared with similar sunglasses to prevent being blinded by this light, so don't worry about them. If you are forced to turn around for whatever reason, do so as quickly as possible. Do not drop any students off when the owners are chasing you, and return to the bus yard if necessary. When the light disappears and you've lost them, you can continue your journey. Keep all doors and windows closed during this time. 13. The true end of this road merges with a larger road and a three-way stop. If any students are still on the bus once you passed all 5 stops, go back to the front of the road and try again. Keep doing this until all students have reached their stops. or if you get too tired to continue. I was very confused on what to think of this. Sure, it sounds impossible, but as a longtime lurker of this subreddit, I know that I should take these rules seriously. Nevertheless, I continue waiting for the students to be dismissed, and I came up with a plan. I will follow the rules unless they could potentially harm someone if they are fake, such as the vehicle ramming. If I can prove a rule to be true without breaking any of them, I will assume that they are all real and I'll follow them all. At 4 a.m., these students exited the school and got on my bus. I estimated that 20 students entered the bus, about 80% capacity under the social distancing guidelines. And despite the situation, most of the students were very chill, as if they had been going to the school for so long that this didn't scare them anymore. Once all the students had entered the bus, I closed the door and I got on the road. The road was a 2-lane, winding road through a forest. Though it was paved, it looked like it hadn't been maintained for decades, with the potholes poorly patched with tar. The pothole fillings looked like chunks of the first road Lightning McQueen paved in cars. Roads like this are nothing unusual here in upstate New York. The first 10 minutes were uneventful, and I dropped off 3 students at stop 1 with no complications. That was until I heard a student scream, "They're here!" I looked in the left mirror and sure enough, I saw a pair of headlights in the distance. Rule number 6. If any other vehicles appear in the road, disable them by any means possible. I accelerated the bus, but the pair of headlights accelerated faster. It caught up to me in a matter of seconds and it started tailgating me. It got so close that the headlights were no longer visible from the rear window, but I still knew it was back there. "What is happening?" I yelled to the students, even though I knew exactly what was going on. I was still hoping that this was all a joke. Several students replied at once, but I couldn't decipher what any of them were saying. "Should I brake check the vehicle?" Every student replied, "Yes," and so I did. I slammed on the brakes, causing my bus to come to a halt within seconds. I heard tires screeching coming from both vehicles, shortly followed by a loud crunch from the back of the bus. I then accelerated the bus, looking out the rear window to see the vehicle behind me had stopped chasing me. A collision at that speed must have broken something important under the hood, as we were going 60 plus at the time of the collision. About a minute later, I arrived at stop 2. 2 students got up, a boy and a girl, so I assumed I was far enough away from the other vehicle to drop them off. I opened the doors and they were about to step off until we noticed our mistake. That wasn't stop 2. It was stop Z. Rule number 2. The bus stops that you can drop kids off at are labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you stop at a bus stop that is not one of the above, leave the stop immediately and continue your journey. I immediately sped off, closing the doors while the bus was already moving. The 2 students were still at the front of the bus, grabbing the railing to avoid falling due to the dramatic acceleration. Not even a second after I closed the doors, I heard demonic screeching from my right. "Driver luck," one of the students yelled. She was pointing at the doors, revealing that something had managed to get a part of itself wedged between the doors. As I had to focus on the road, I didn't have much time to look at it, but I was still able to catch a glimpse of whatever she was pointing at. It looked like an arm of a massive gingerbread man, except it reflected no light. I could hear whatever that arm was attached to being dragged across the asphalt, sounding like a mix of wood and metal. I briefly opened the doors, causing the creature to lose its grip and fall to the ground. "What the heck was that?" I asked the students who were still on the staircase. "I don't know," replied the female student. "I've seen that thing a few times. The fake bus stop is fairly uncommon. It usually happens at least once a month. but the creatures usually don't get to the bus in time anyway. The male student returned to his seat. This event somehow made me come up with a question for the female student. Actually, how long have you been here? I have lived here since I was a baby. Every house here has its own set of weird rules, but it's all my family could afford. So we've been living together ever since. Oh, and what's your name? She added. George, and you? Angela. Oh, okay. Would you mind staying up here so we can... This is the police. Stop your vehicle immediately. A masculine voice yelled through a megaphone. The voice sounded like a pathetic attempt to be a human. It sounded like the sentence was put through a text-to-speech software and blasted out of a megaphone. I was so into my conversation with Angela that I was completely oblivious to the police cruiser in the left lane. The other students were also distracted by us, so they were unable to warn me like they did last time. I slowed down my bus, causing the cruiser to start passing me, intending to do a pit maneuver once it was in position. But what I saw in the cab will haunt me forever. The two creatures inside were vaguely humanoid, enough for them to operate a motor vehicle designed for humans. They looked like the creature from Venom, but covered in bluish black scales, as if they were reptiles. The one in the passenger seat turned its head 90 degrees to look at me, without moving anything below its neck. Its eyes were thin, vertical lines, stretching from the top of the mouth to the top of the forehead, like the eyes of these stick people from the Henry Stickmin collection, except they emitted a white light for them, like Herobrine from Minecraft. The two of us stared at each other for what felt like forever. I was not concerned about the fact that I wasn't paying attention to the road. I somehow completely forgot I was driving a bus. I even forgot that I existed altogether. The entire concept of anything I was looking at vanished from my mind, as if I was in the latest stages of dementia. All I knew was the bright light emitting from the creature's eyes. After an unmeasurable amount of time, we broke eye contact with the cruiser and got stuck between a rock and a school bus. I immediately regained the concept of existence and realized what was going on. The bus had been going in a straight line, but the road wasn't straight, and the bus had been veering into the left lane this whole time, until the bus was pushing the cruiser against the cliff on the left. This caused the cruiser to come to a halt almost instantly. I immediately got back into my lane to avoid meeting a similar fate to the cruiser. "You're finally back!" Angela screamed inches from my face. She got down and cried on the floor while repeating the same sentence multiple times through sobs. "How long was I staring at that thing?" I asked her. She just cried harder. "Oh, okay," I said awkwardly. There's a tissue box between the dashboard and the windshield. You should probably take off your mask until you're done crying." I wanted to comfort her, but I had no idea what I was supposed to do in this situation. So I just let her cry on the floor while resting against my right leg. This usually works for me when I'm having a breakdown, but I have no idea how neurotypical brains work, or if Angela is neurotypical in the first place. Less than a minute after the crash, I arrived at stop number 3. 2 students got up to exit, so Angela got out of the way so they could get off at the stop and begin their trek down the ominous path beside it. As I left the stop, Angela answered my question from earlier. "You were looking at that thing for like 5 minutes, she said. "And you were so stiff that I couldn't do anything. I couldn't access the brakes. I could barely move the steering wheel. At least your foot wasn't on the diesel." I laughed. I just call it the accelerator, which is stupider, calling a liquid fuel gas or calling the accelerator the gas. I guess we should pay attention to what's going on around us so something doesn't sneak up on us like last time. A good idea. Well, I'm going back to my seat so I don't get yeeted through the windshield. But if you need any help or have any more questions for me, Just call me and I'll come right back up here." "All right." Minutes later, I heard clunky noises from the back of the bus. Before any of us could comprehend what was going on, the engine stopped. Rule 10. If the engine stops for seemingly no reason, immediately start it up again and floor it. Do not look at what is behind the bus. If that doesn't work, refer to Rule 7 for everyone's safety. I desperately tried to start the engine, but it was no use. The bus was still gliding down the road because of inertia, but I could barely move the steering wheel. Power steering was disabled when the engine turned off. The road was still relatively straight, enough for me to stay on the road with my very limited steering. But if I encountered a curve, I would have to stop the bus and execute Rule 7. The rules implied something behind the bus managed to turn off the engine, and that's when I noticed a pair of headlights suddenly appear behind me. The unseen vehicle went into the left lane and accelerated until it was beside me. It was the cruiser from earlier. Those guys had turned off their lights and followed my taillights to navigate the road. I immediately stopped looking at it to avoid it being hypnotized again. After holding down the starter for about 10 seconds, the engine finally came back to life and I floored it. The cruiser noticed this and accelerated. Now that I've got my powered steering back, I blindly swerved into the left lane while staring directly ahead. I heard a loud crunch from my left. I looked into my left mirror and saw that the cruiser was no longer following me. The entire chassis was bent with the corner of my bus collided with the back right door. The things attempted to hypnotize me through the mirror, but they were too far away at this point to affect me. Seconds after the crash, I saw stop 4 on the right, but skipped it because the cruiser was way too close to it. The hill was still on the left, but the area on the right was flat enough to fit a few houses. These houses were fairly large, probably about 2,500 square feet on the top 2 floors, and an unknown amount of space underground if they had basements. I remember stop 1 and 3 didn't have any houses visible from the bus stop, so this was the first time I got to see the houses. As I passed the houses, I decided to ask a few questions to the residents. "Can someone who lives at stop 4 come up here for a moment? I have questions about the houses." A boy from the seat behind me came up. "How much does it actually cost to live here?" But before I could say anything else, I saw an old man with a cane slowly cross the road. Rule 11. If you see a human on the road, run it over, even if it resembles a loved one. It is not a human. I already had enough faith in the rules at this point to know that it was not a human, but the screeching he made when I ran him over further enforced it. After a short pause, the boy answered my question. $50 a month, for me at least. And yes, we have rules just as weird and terrifying as the ones in here." Oh, wow. It's not as much of a bargain as it sounds. Anyone who lives here is either extremely poor or is oblivious to what they are getting themselves into. Most of the cost is paid with the mental and sometimes physical trauma that comes with living here. Yeah, I've heard the stories about places like this, and definitely not worth it. I doubt you could report any of this to the police or some other authority. My family actually did have to call 911 once. We told the operator that some dude with a gun was in our house. Nobody believes the officers that showed up enforced Fred, the creature that terrorizes the residents at stop 4, to retreat back to the forest. Maybe we could tell you our story sometime. Yeah, maybe. I'm going back to my seat now. Name's Tommy, by the way. Nice meeting you, Tommy. I would like to hear your stories about your life here sometime. And Tommy was about to return to his seat when he noticed something. "Oh crap, Rule 9, he yelled. Rule 9. If you see a creature on your right running parallel to your bus, do not under any circumstances open any doors or windows. While it will always run at the speed of your bus, You can confuse it by constantly accelerating and decelerating. Doing that may allow you to get into a position in which you can run it over. This is the only known way to stop it. I looked to the right and I saw it. Running beside the bus doors was a creature running on all fours. It was like a brute version of the creatures in the cruiser. Its arms and legs were nearly identical, and it was running like a horse. The bus was going 40 miles per hour at this point, a very appropriate speed for this road. I sped up, but so did it. Tommy quickly ran back to his seat as the bus was starting to become unstable as I drove way too fast for this road. Now at over 80 miles per hour, the thing was still beside the door, and it had been since I had spotted it. I slowed down, but the creature didn't decelerate as quickly. Now at 60 miles per hour, I aimed the bus right at it and ran it over as the creature attempted to slow down. And before I could celebrate, I saw a pair of taillights ahead. The taillights brightened as the vehicle slowed down. They saw me, and this wasn't anything small either. It was a semi-truck. The truck slowed all the way down to 20 miles per hour, forcing me to do the same. I knew the driver was planning something, but I still had no idea what was going on. My questions were soon answered, as a bright light was reflected off the left mirror, darting around the front of the bus looking for my eyes. But with the 40-foot trailer behind the truck, this made the precision required for hypnosis incredibly difficult. It quickly realized this wasn't going to work and it stopped. As I followed the truck, we brainstormed ideas on how to defeat the thing, even citing past experiences with large vehicles like this one. But to my right, above the forest, I saw something unnatural. The mansion. It was at least 2 floors taller than the forest. It was also very large horizontally as well. I didn't know how to describe the building other than saying it reminded me of a woodland mansion from Minecraft, with the way that it was surrounded by the forest and the dimensions. The mansion gave me an idea. Hey guys, are the mansion owners allied with the creature driving the truck? I don't think so, replied Angela. I rarely see them interacting if they do. It's usually hostile, though they're not as aggressive as they are to us. Oh, good. You're going to make the mansion owners attack the truck, aren't you? I heard Tommy say. Exactly. Well, just get as far away from the truck as you can so they don't see you too, replied Tommy. All right. I turned off my lights once we were about 500 feet away from the mansion. The truck driver looked back at us through the mirror for a few seconds. The light illuminated the cab, as if the driver was trying to say, I know you're still back there, you idiot. As we slowly approached the mansion, I let the bus slow down so I could gain some distance from the truck. I didn't touch the air brakes to avoid being heard by the truck driver. It may have known I was still behind it, but it didn't know how far away I was. Once I was about 200 feet away, the bus was down to 2 miles per hour. I pulled the parking brake, causing the bus to come to a halt silently. The truck was oblivious to what I was doing and it was still going forward, very slowly for some reason. It seemed that it was trying to stall me until reinforcements arrived. We all got our sunglasses to protect our eyes from what was about to happen, ready to put them on at any moment. The moment the truck's light struck the road in front of the mansion, it happened. For the split second, I saw the light at full force. My vision was already being obstructed by spots, as if I had been staring at the sun for several minutes. Even with the sunglasses, it still bothered my eyes to look at it. The light swarmed the truck like bees that had their hive disturbed. While the owners were distracted, I put the bus into reverse and I floored it. The sound of the engine got the attention of the truck driver, but it was unable to turn around or reverse very quickly due to the trailer. So, it ended up having to go forward to flee the owners. Now that the truck was gone, I went back into drive and continued down the road, though not very quickly to not catch up with the truck. I slowed down even more so I could get a better look at the now vacant building. The front of the mansion had wooden walls with a concrete base. There is a hole in the front with many equally sized rooms, with one window across the walls. Each room was illuminated by light bulbs on a chandelier. The rooms had a wide variety of contents. Some looked natural, some looked weird, and some were disturbing. One room looked like a kitchen, one like a bedroom. One was almost completely filled with a pile of wires. One was a prison cell. One had tens of black cats inside. And one had a floor covered in spikes with doll heads on them. How original. The room full of cats caused me to stop the bus. "Why is there a room full of cats?" I asked the students. "A room full of what? They have cats," Tommy replied, who was in the seat directly behind me. "I don't think we've ever gotten a good look at the mansion before. This is the first time someone managed to distract the owners," another student replied. I pulled the parking brake and I got out of my seat. "I want to investigate the cat room," I told the students. "Go to the window, but don't enter the mansion. Just don't," the same student from earlier had replied. "And park the bus right next to the window," Angela added. "Wait, hold on. What is your name?" I asked the anonymous student. "Oh, I'm Joseph." "Alright, good to know." I then did what Joseph said. I positioned the bus so that the doors were right next to the window of the cat room. I got out and I peered into the room. Cats everywhere, very malnourished, and the smell was rough. There was an island literally made of crap in the center. Definitely not okay. I grabbed a rock and I smashed the window several times before the window split in half. I could have used the gun, but I didn't want to waste any bullets or attract any unwanted attention. Tommy, Angela, and two other students came out to help. Once the glass pane had split, we kept hitting it in a concentrated spot until we had created a hole large enough for the cats to get through. As soon as we had pointed this out to them, the cats rushed out to freedom. Whatever they were going to get themselves into in this forest was a better fate than whatever the owners were doing with them in there. The wire room was one room away from the cat room, with the prison cell in between the two. I walked over to investigate. I probably could get a few $1,000 for all that copper, I pointed out to the students. "Will we get any of it?" Tommy asked. "I'll give you each some for helping me retrieve it, but I'll take most of it as compensation for what I had to put up with today. $20 an hour isn't cutting it." I also had the rest of the students come out to help me with stealing the wire, promising a small portion of what I'm going to get for them. I broke the window with the rock and made a small hole the size of a fist. You know, it would be a lot easier if someone goes inside the mansion and... "No!" Every student replied at once. "Okay, never mind then." We continued, bashing the window until the hole was big enough to climb through. We managed to load all the wires into the bus before the owners returned. Even if they did return before they were done, we had already set up a place to hide. The students then organized the wire once we were already on the road. As I was about to arrive at stop 5, I saw the owners returning from their mission. I quickly put on my sunglasses as I floored the bus and blindly drove through the light. However, the owners were not interested in me, and they continued their journey home. It seems that they only attacked those who disturbed them, and somehow driving by their mansion does that. They still had no idea that I had freed their cats and stole their wire, and even when they find out, they'll have no idea who did it. I arrived at stop 5 a minute later, and dismissed Joseph and 4 other students. This bus stop was similar to stop 4, with very similar houses as well. I still had 7 students in the bus as I skipped stop 2 and 4. I knew what I had to do. Rule 13. The true end of this road merges with a larger road at a three-way stop. If any students are still on the bus once you passed all 5 stops, go back to the front of the road and try again. Keep doing this until all students have reached their stops, or if you get too tired to continue. I sighed as I left the stop. You know you're going to have to drive down this road again, right? Tommy asked. Yeah, I know. Hey, at least this time you'll be more prepared. And you know that there's a fake bus stop between stops 1 and 2. And you know that the mansion is between stops 4 and 5. This doesn't refresh every time you go down the road, unlike the Rule 3 road and the dead end. Alright, I'll go back and do another round. As I continued down the road, I found the semi-truck, or what was left of it. I parked the bus next to the truck to get a better look at it. The truck seemed to have crashed straight into a tree instead of turning for the curve. The trailer's walls were partially melted, causing the roof to collapse onto the burning wooden crates inside. The body of the truck was completely destroyed, with only the chassis and engine block still being recognizable. In the melting remains of the cab, I saw the charred skeleton of the driver. It's terrifying to think that could have been me. Holy crap, a student muttered. Tommy and I got out of the bus and walked to the side of the truck to further investigate what the heck had happened here. Looking at the vague remains of the truck, I determined that the skeleton was in the bed at the back of the cab. I theorized that the owner's blinding lights caused the driver to be unable to see the road, and was therefore unaware of the curve. After the crash, the driver hid in the back of the truck in the fetal position, as the owners brightened their lights to the point that the heat literally melted the steel body of the truck. This, combined with the fuel tanks that were set on fire, burned the driver to the point where it was just a skeleton. Are we looting this one too? Tommy asked. I don't think there's anything valuable that's still intact. I'm just investigating what the heck happened here. Look man, I'm just as horrified as you are. I've heard of disappearances related to the mansion owners, but I've never seen what happened to them. The rules were just updated accordingly. We returned to the bus and continued down the road. I found the end of the road and made a left turn onto Route 3, intending to go back to the beginning of Old Military Road. Not long after I got on the road, I heard a student scream. What the? She was interrupted by her own choking. George, stop the bus now, Tommy instructed, as if I wasn't already doing that. I got out of my seat and looked back to see several students fighting a wire that was strangling the student. The wires had come to life and were crawling around like snakes. We evacuated the bus and I locked the doors hoping that they couldn't unlock them. Once we were outside, I freed the student from the wire that was choking her. I then inspected that wire and saw the copper bending and contorting on its own. The wires were fiddling around in the driver's seat, but they couldn't start the bus because I had the keys. Now what? A student asked. I could call 911, I replied. And what are you going to tell them? That we're being attacked by copper snakes? Tommy asked rhetorically. I paused for a moment before I had an idea. I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There are these snake things on my bus. I managed to trap them all inside, but I can't get rid of them. And what's your address, sir? I'm on Route 3 near the spot where Old Military Road merges onto the highway. Okay, sir, we have sent animal control to deal with the situation. Can you stay on the line for me? Yeah, I can do. I was interrupted by the engine roaring to life. How? Sir, what is going on? The bus accelerated and drove into a guardrail on the side of the road at an angle, and was pushed back onto the road by the guardrail. The bus continued accelerating as fast as it could, while scraping against the guardrail to guide it down the highway. What? The snakes just hijacked the bus. Tommy spoke for me. The operator tried her best to stay professional, but she couldn't avoid letting out a chuckle about how ridiculous this situation was. Okay, we're going to deal with that as well. What direction is the bus going?
It's going east, but is scraping against the guardrail to guide it down the road.
Alright, sir. We've dispatched several units to close the road until the runaway vehicle is stopped. Do you need a ride?
Yes, ma'am, but there's 8 of us. I'm a school bus driver.
That's fine. We can dispatch 3 units to take you to your destination.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
A few minutes later, 3 police cars arrived. I told the officers to take us back to the bus yard. As we drove down the highway, we found the bus. The wires had figured out how to use the steering wheel, but still had no idea what they were doing. They were swerving all over the road attempting to not scrape against the guardrail. I don't think they had any other perception of reality outside of touch. Multiple police cruisers and even a SWAT truck were chasing the bus at this point. It seemed that police from nearby towns were called in to help with this pursuit. Once we had passed the bus, the officer in the vehicle I was in interviewed me as we traveled to our destination. Sir, how did these snakes get into your bus? I was at a bus stop when they somehow snuck in and tried to choke out one of my students, and we had to evacuate the bus so I could free the student from the snake that was strangling her. I partially lied. Why did you and your students evacuate the bus? Well, I didn't want to be attacked by the snakes as I fought the snake that was strangling one of my students. There were like 50 of them, so if I stayed in there, all of us probably would have been strangled to death. We arrived at the bus yard a few minutes later. I thanked the officers and I went to the guard. The officers then turned around and drove back to help pursue the bus. Hey guard, it's me again. The guard paused whatever he was doing on his phone and he studied me for a moment. Oh, hey George, where's the bus? Oh, it was stolen by copper snakes. Yeah, of course they did. These jobs are weird as heck. Wait, you too? Yeah, come in, I want to show you something. The guard unlocked the thick steel door and invited us in. The shack had a desk against the back wall and an office chair facing the table, while also being next to the window on the wall to its left. Above the desk was a wall of 6 monitors on the back wall, each displaying the input of a camera somewhere in the yard. The desk had a laptop on it in front of 2 of the monitors, though those monitors can be seen if the laptop is closed. The shack was large enough for all of us to fit inside, though it was still a bit cramped. He picked up the paper I saw him look at when I first got here. Rules for Frederickson bus yard guarding. You must follow these rules when guarding the bus yard. We cannot ensure your safety if you break any of these rules. 1. Only the following people are permitted to enter the bus yard: Ernest Frederickson, Anna Evergreen, Harry Williams, George Redwood. If someone arrives that identifies as someone not on this list, hold them at gunpoint until they leave or you have to shoot them to defend yourself. 2. If a bus or other vehicle in the yard starts its engine for no reason, close the metal shades on the window and wait until it turns off. It may attempt to accelerate, but all buses and vehicles should be in park, so this won't work. Do not, under any circumstances, make your presence known until the engine stops. 3. If one of the monitors starts showing static, smash it with a crowbar that we provided for you if possible. If you are currently experiencing Rule 2 at the same time, unplug the power strip all the monitors are powered by, and get as far away from the monitor as you can without exiting the shack. Keep track of which monitor was showing static earlier, such as putting a sticky note on it. Once Rule 2 ends, smash the monitor before turning the rest of them back on. 4. At any time, a man may show up thinking your shack is a snack bar. Give him something to eat, or you'll be the snack. If you cannot give him a snack due to Rule 2, call us and continue hiding until we've dealt with the situation. 5. If the sun turns red, don't look at the sky for a prolonged period of time. You won't die, but the red sun will literally destroy your retinas if you look at it for more than a few seconds. The same may happen if you look at the sky, though it'll take a little longer. Both of these are safe to look at through a camera, and pictures taken of the sky or sun cannot harm you, but they can damage the camera similar to how they can damage your eyes. 6. Don't sleep on the job, just don't. If you get too tired to continue your shift, alert us and we'll send someone to take your shift. Only leave once your replacement has arrived. Do not trust your peripheral vision if this happens. 7. If you see a shadow figure roaming the nearby area, pretend that it doesn't exist. Do not let it know it has physically entered our world. 8. At around 3 a.m., your mother may show up and ask you about your job. She'll look like she does in the present, but if she's dead, she'll look like she did shortly before her death. If you're adopted, your biological mother will show up and act like she knows you. If this happens, pretend you don't know her and tell her to get out. After I read it, the students took turns reading the rules for themselves. As we were doing this, my bus showed up. It took a while to get it here as it kept hitting those things along the way. The bus was still being chased by several police cruisers and the SWAT truck. We got out of the shack and watched as the wires completely ignored the nearby curve and drove into a tree. They then turned the steering wheel as far right as it could go, before reversing into the same tree again. The bus accelerated forward, swerving all over the place as it drove across the road and right through the fence, only stopping when it struck one of the buses. The wires paused for a moment before they were about to continue their reckless journey. However, the hood was still open from when the engine was disabled by the creatures from Old Military Road. So, one of the officers pulled out a shotgun and shot the engine repeatedly. The most American thing I've ever seen. This actually worked as one of the bullets sliced the serpentine belt, causing the bus to lose several important functions. The wires reversed back onto the road in a straight line, as they no longer had powered steering. It continued driving, but it couldn't do much due to the lack of powered steering, and the engine eventually overheated and stopped right before it struck that same tree again, this time causing it to fall over and collapse onto the roof of the bus. As the wires were trying to figure out what was going on, the officers investigated the bus. The guard, the students, and I got closer now that the bus could no longer run us over. The officer that had interviewed me earlier saw us approach the bus. "You call these things snakes?" he asked me rhetorically. "If I told you my bus was stolen by giant copper worms, you would have not believed me," I replied. "Yeah, good point. So now what?" "I don't know, they seem stuck in there, so we might just leave them in there and tow the bus." I was about to reply when the officer's radio received a message. "Philip, an armored truck got on the road and is going westbound towards your location." "Sarah, weren't you blocking one of the entrances to the road?" "Yeah, but the vehicle drove over my car and got on the road. It's that big. I think it's one of those marauders from that Top Gear episode." The rest of the officers were now gathered around Philip to hear what Sarah was saying. "I wasn't in the car though. I was telling the driver why the road was closed when he drove over my car right after I told him why." "Alright, copy that." Philip ended the call. "Yeah, you know what she said. Use your vehicles and the bus to form a barricade. This won't stop the truck, but it'll delay us long enough to open fire on it." The truck eventually showed up, and it was indeed a black marauder. The marauder was being chased by even more police cars. A police helicopter was hovering far above us now. The car barricade would stand no chance against the marauder. The truck stopped, coming to a halt a few yards from the barricade. Not because the barricade would stop it, but because the driver found what he was looking for: the bus. It was clear that the driver was looking for the wires, implied by how swiftly he got on the road after Sarah informed him why the road was closed. The officers took one look at the vehicle and knew they were screwed. The helicopter descended and hovered next to the marauder, but fled when it started being shot at by a man in the passenger seat. I noticed that it was actually a news helicopter, which explains why it did that. One of the officers called the dispatcher.
"We're going to need backup. Send in the US military. There's no way we can force the driver to get out." The driver got on the truck's intercom. "This is the Red Moth auction hall. One of our clients reported an item stolen. We are here to retrieve it." Another officer grabbed a megaphone from her car to join the amplified shouting match. "Sir, that does not justify running over an officer's vehicle and evading the—" "Yes, it does. You wouldn't understand." While this was happening, a blue 2010's Ford pickup along with a police cruiser escorting it arrived at the bus yard from Riverside Street. The truck drove through the hole created by the bus and stopped beside us. And the officer in the police cruiser went to join whatever was happening at the intersection. An old man was inside the truck. Despite his age, he stepped out of the truck with ease. "Rough first day, huh?" he asked me. The guard and I stared at him in confusion. The students stared at us in confusion, giving us a look that said, "Wait, you don't know this guy." After an awkward moment of silence, the man identified himself. "Oh, I'm Ernest Fredrickson, the dude who hired you. Sorry about that." Not knowing who this guy was, a million questions went through my head. But before I could ask any of those questions, the driver of the Marauder opened his door to throw grenades at the officers. But he made a fatal mistake. Either he didn't notice us standing 20 feet away, or he didn't expect us to intervene. This is when I leapt into action. I grabbed the guard's hand and we ran to the truck. Ernest pulled out his firearm and joined us. The driver noticed us and quickly threw the grenades he already activated in advance, and he tried to close the door. But before he was able to, I managed to get my left wrist stuck between the door and the wall of the truck, stopping the door from being closed. The driver attempted to repeatedly slam the door on my wrist, hoping that I would remove it because of the pain, but I didn't. While this was happening, the guard and Ernest opened fire at the driver. About half the bullets struck the door, but the other half managed to get into the cab, and most of those hit the driver. We ripped the door out of the dead man's grip and I climbed into the truck to unbuckle his seatbelt, so we could remove the body from the seat. But when I climbed under the seat of the truck, I found another man in the passenger seat, with the exact same attire as the driver. That being what seemed to be a black version of what the US Army wears. I noticed that he had a rifle, so I was forced to shoot him to avoid being shot myself. All of this happened in less than 10 seconds. The grenades the driver threw earlier landed behind the barricade and blew up, injuring several officers. Some of these surviving officers tended to the injured ones, while the rest came over to the Marauder to inspect it. The three of us returned to the yard where the kids were. Shortly after the officers had entered the Marauder, the back doors opened and 8 men rushed out of the truck. They all had the same attire as the 2 in the front, and 3 of them had briefcases for some reason. 5 officers chased them on foot. We all thought this was the end as none of them had any weapons, or at least we thought. The one with the briefcases stopped for a moment and threw their briefcases at the officers. One of them had managed to strike an officer, knocking him to the ground. But the briefcases had another use other than being a projectile, because as the officers passed them, they were detonated, causing a massive explosion. Chunks of briefcase were flung outward, functioning as shrapnel. One of them hit Tommy, 2 hit the girl who was being strangled by the wire earlier, 1 hit Angela, and 2 more hit each me and Ernest. Luckily, we all survived with minor injuries. When the smoke cleared up, we saw the scene that lied before us. The Marauder suffered very little damage and the bus's body was heavily damaged but still intact, including the windows. The windshield was struck by 4 briefcase chunks, leaving spiderweb cracks where they collided with the windshield. The body of the police cars were ripped apart from the force of the explosion, and the fuel tanks were spilling gasoline all over the road. Even the traffic lights at the intersection were bent. 7 ambulances arrived from Riverside Street, intending to treat the officers injured by the grenade explosion, but found far more than they had bargained for. But in a dark twist of irony, this was still enough ambulances to transport the surviving officers to the hospital.
Out of the 8 men in the back of the Marauder, 5 of them survived with minor injuries. The other 3 were dead or seriously injured. All 7 of the kids hid in the guard shack as the guard Ernest and I approached the group with our weapons drawn. As soon as they saw us, the healthy ones dropped their injured comrades and fled down Route 3 on foot, in the same direction the Marauder came from. The 3 of us chased them and managed to shoot all 5 of them. We walked back to the yard and saw a man talking with the paramedics. "What do you mean? The snack bar is right there. What do you mean it's not open?" "Crap, they didn't know." Rule number 4. At any time a man may show up thinking your shack is a snack bar, give him something to eat or you'll be the snack. If you cannot give him a snack due to Rule 2, call us and continue hiding until we've dealt with the situation. We continued approaching the ambulances, but still try not to attract the man's attention. "Sir, we're paramedics. We do not have a snack bar." The man went from annoyed to angry. His voice became incredibly deep and demonic. "Give me a snack right now." The paramedic stared at the man, very confused at what just happened. The man's fingernails grew incredibly quickly, and they transformed into claws in the process. He used his Wolverine hands to attack the man, peeling off a thick and large chunk of his forearm. The paramedic ran off and screamed in agony due to being literally skinned alive. The man's fingernails broke off and the man returned to normal. "Thanks, have a nice day," he said as if he just bought this chunk of human flesh from a snack bar. He left in the direction he seemed to have come from. Several shadow figures appeared near him and wandered aimlessly. Rule 7. If you see a shadow figure roaming their nearby area, pretend that it doesn't exist. Don't let it know that it has physically entered our world. I walked up to the paramedics to inform them of Rule 7. Luckily, they complied, as they all witnessed what happens if you break Rule 4. The paramedics continued loading the injured officers into the ambulances, with the one that was skinned alive joining them, when a heavy-duty tow truck that was going way too fast for Riverside Street bashed through 2 of the ambulances that were in its way, while making a sharp right turn into the left lane of Route 3, almost flipping over in the process. This truck was definitely able to tow the bus, and that's exactly what they did. The truck reversed to the bus and 2 men got out, almost identical to the 10 in the Marauder, and quickly hooked up the bus to the tow cable. The men got back into their truck and sped off in the direction that the truck was facing. This all happened within 15 seconds. The paramedics were about to nope out of there, but the men in the tow truck didn't have time to attack them. Both of the ambulances that were damaged were still drivable. One of the paramedics was injured by the truck's crash, having been ran over by his own ambulance, and had to be transported to the hospital by his coworkers. He is expected to make a full recovery. Out of these 17 officers that were at this war zone, only 7 survived. All 5 of the officers that were perusing the men were blown to bits due to being so close to the explosion. 3 officers were inside of the Marauder at the time of the explosion, and they all survived with virtually no injuries. 7 officers were injured by the grenades. Out of them, 4 were declared dead at the scene, 2 died on the way to the hospital, and only 1 survived. She is severely injured but is expected to make a full recovery. Out of the 4 officers attending to the injured 7, 1 died at the scene, 1 was critically injured, and the other 2 survived with minor injuries as they were behind the bus at the time. The one that was critically injured is also expected to make a full recovery. I don't know where the other 6 officers were at the time of the explosion, but they all died at the scene. When interviewed, I told them what happened and explained that I said snakes because they wouldn't believe me if I told them the truth. The only difference is that I said a pile of copper wires was next to a bus stop and they invaded the bus. The students all told the same lie. Ernest, the guard, and the surviving officers backed up my story saying that there were wires in the bus. None of us were charged with anything, and the 3 of us that raided the Marauder were praised for our bravery. All 10 of the men died at the scene. Their bodies couldn't be identified. The Marauder was impounded by the police. Its license plate revealed that the vehicle was registered under the name Alfred Cornell, with the address being resident somewhere in Maine. When the police went to that location, they found an empty lot in a semi-remote location, with nothing on it other than a brick wall that was 20 feet long, 8 feet tall, and 1 foot wide. The tow truck and my bus were never seen again, for now at least. Ernest tried to track down the bus, but its tracker was disabled somehow. The news station that tried to film the massacre was ordered by the federal government to delete the limited footage they had captured, and to never speak of this until further notice. The rest of us that witnessed the event were essentially given NDAs by the government. The family members of the dead officers were given large settlements. These surviving officers had their medical bills paid for, and they were given a smaller settlement for their troubles. The 7 students that didn't make it to their stop were taken care of by Ernest, his wife, and his 3 middle-aged children until they could be returned home. Ernest told me that I wasn't actually being paid $20 an hour. The ad was only listed that way to not attract unwanted attention. I was actually being paid $200 an hour, and he gave me a $1,000 bonus for my troubles today. The guard's wage was also multiplied by 10, and he also got a $1,000 bonus. I told Ernest what actually happened, and we now have a 14th rule for the bus drivers. Rule 14. Do not steal from the mansion owners, because they will find you, and they will do whatever it takes to get their stuff back.